IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Wednesday. It is October 11th. And I'm going to tell you all something right now. I am tired. I don't feel good. It's been a long night. We were doing site updates all last night. But you know what? Like, I start breaking down the film and I start looking at the stats and I start looking back at past film and I start doing all this analytical stuff. And I'm fired up. I'm ready for the game on Saturday night. I am really, I'm much more optimistic about where things stand right now for Notre Dame than I did before. And it's not about, what we saw. It's if Notre Dame can mentally get back on track on Saturday night. And when I mean mentally, I mean getting the energy level back, getting the focus back, getting the confidence back, getting the swagger back. If they can do that this weekend, I really like this matchup for Notre Dame. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't. That's the big unknown, right? Is how is Notre Dame going to respond to the last 3 weeks mentally and emotionally? It's been a draining time for them. It's been a physically draining time for them, a mentally draining time for them. The team just did not look right Saturday night. But you've got another chance to get back at it this week, and we're gonna find out what kind of pride level this football team has this weekend. And if they answer the bell in that regard, I really like this matchup. And again, we'll find out on Saturday night if it happens. But I'm just telling you guys, there's a lot to be excited about here. So, midweek rundown today, we're going to talk about a few different things. Number one, we'll get into at the beginning sort of the matchups that matter, which we do every week. I'm going to dive into the three comparisons on offense and the offensive areas, and then the three defensive areas. I'll talk about two, and then really get into one. And it's more of this is the matchup that I think is going to have the biggest impact in the game. And it's going to be the same this week. It's going to be, I'll just tell you right now, it's going to be run game. Both sides of the ball, it's going to be run game. And I'll explain why when we get into it. Then we're going to get into step up time. Who are the players or units in this instance that need to come out on Saturday night and say, hey, look, you've got to step up. You've got to play well. In some instances this week, it's about guys who haven't been playing well recently. It's not always that way. It's not by rule that way on offense. Defensively, it's partly that, but more so it's about in order to beat USC, you guys got to step up in this game. Some of these guys on defense have been playing well. It's just about, look, you gotta be at your best. And so we'll talk about that as well. We'll get into those matchups. And then, just talk about the future of the offense a little bit and from a personnel standpoint and what this unit should be and what it can be. And so we'll talk about, sort of the reinforcements a little bit on offense. And some of them are on the roster. They're just younger and those guys' maturity. And then in the other instance, it's going to come down to, guys that are coming in and what the future holds for Notre Dame offense and why it's important to kind of come out and say, hey, look, you've got to get this right, Coach Freeman, whatever it is with getting Coach Parker going, whatever your decisions are going to make, you've got to figure this out for yourself and then for your staff, because you're going to have some horses these next few years. And it's about saying, are we going to really truly take advantage of having these guys? So I'm excited about it. And just it's rivalry week and I'm fired up. And I hope that the Notre Dame players have the same excitement level that I do. You never know, because you don't know if, like I would say, players aren't as invested as fans in certain aspects of the game. They're invested in going out there, doing their best and all that. But do the players really, there's nobody on the football team that's been alive from a player standpoint as long as I've been passionate about this rivalry, for example, right? And you just never quite know how it's going to be, and every team is different. But I'm excited to see this game kind of come back and see what this team can do. And so we're going to dive into all that today. It's going to be a lot of fun. I will answer a few questions. There were a few questions put in. I'm going to answer some of the mailbags that were put in before the show got started. If you guys put in any mailbags during the show, I'll try and find them, but the odds of it happening are probably not great. But I will do my best to get in there and get some of those. If you put any super chats in, obviously we'll get to those as well and be ready to rock and roll. So I'm ready to go. I hope you all are ready to go. We're going to be fired up today. I'll ask you guys in the chat, talk football. But some of the stuff that we're seeing about firing people and all that, just you've made your opinion known. We're done with it. Okay. We're focused on USC. That's a conversation for the offseason. So I don't want the chat to be filled with all those type of things, man. We're here talking Notre Dame USC, and nobody's getting fired this week. So don't make me fire you from the chat. That would be the ideal scenario. So I'm ready to rock and roll, and we're going to get this sucker going. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's dive into the matchup between Notre Dame and USC. And I'm just going to kind of talk big picture here for a second, because when you look at the two teams, you see they're both kind of coming into this game reeling a little bit. And oh, you know what? Let me stop and interrupt, because somebody just brought up something that I meant to talk about at the beginning of the show and I forgot. So because of the weather this weekend, the rain and all the different things that we're expecting, and the cold and the wind, we decided to cancel the tailgate for this weekend. And, my parents have to drive 800 miles to get here. And I didn't want them to get here and then maybe not be able to do it, because just the nature of when it's really windy and cold. So it's going to be off. And so they're going to actually be coming in town for the pit game in a couple weeks. So that's actually when we're going to do our next Irish Breakdown tailgate. So just wanted to remind some of you, I had said that we were going to have a tailgate this weekend, but I had to kind of make the decision early, because my parents were otherwise going to have to drive, 800 miles to get here and get to everything. So, so I apologize for forgetting about that, but thank you to Aiden Regan for asking about that. So, apologies on that. So let's restart this sucker. Let's get this back going. I'm going to talk a little bit big picture about this game a little bit, because the interesting aspect of the breakdown is that even though Notre Dame has a 5-2 record, and even though USC is undefeated coming into the game, neither team comes into the game with a lot of great momentum, if we're being honest about it and looking at it. And I know that USC fans are feeling optimistic from what I've seen, more so because of a lack of respect for Notre Dame, because of how poorly Notre Dame has played in recent weeks. And that's fair, because, Notre Dame has played poorly in recent weeks. When you look at USC, I've said this before, you take Caleb Williams off that roster, they're 4-2 against what's been a pretty weak schedule, but he is on the roster. So how deep do you want to go into that conversation? Not very. Then you start asking, well, what would their record be if they'd played Notre Dame's schedule? I don't know what that would be. I have no clue. I'd have no clue what Notre Dame's record would be if they played USC schedule. We don't know that, but here's what I know. We can look at context. And the fact of the matter is that USC is 6-0 right now. None of the opponents that they have played at this point in time in the season are ranked in the top 25. If you look at the opponents that they've played, they beat a San Jose State team who's ranked who's not ranked, but they are 1-5. They beat an 0-5 Nevada team who a week after USC beat them 66-14, lost to Idaho 33-7. They then beat a Stanford team that is 1-4. Their only win of the season is a road win over Hawaii, who is currently 2-4, with wins over Albany, a 1AA school, and New Mexico State by 3. They lost this past weekend 24-20 to UNLV. They beat an Arizona State team that's currently 1-5. They beat a Colorado team that's currently 4-2, and they beat an Arizona team that is 3-3. So, that is that's not great work right there. I'm kind of trying to do the math in my head a little bit. So, 1-5 San Jose State, 0-5 Nevada. Stanford, what did I say, is 1-4? Stanford is no, that's Arizona State. They're 1-5. Stanford is 1-4. Colorado's 4-2, and Arizona's 3-3. So if you look at it, USC's opponents on the season so far are 10-25 on the season. And so they haven't been tested. This is going to be their first test, and this is going to be a great opportunity for USC to come out. And because if you watch USC, even though they're winning, they keep dropping in the rankings. They were as high as, I believe, 5th. They've dropped all the way down to 10th this past week after beating Arizona. And it's kind of like, USC falls behind 17-0, and they don't play well against Arizona. They got to come back, and it's like they didn't get any credit for coming back. They didn't get any credit for, hey, they battled back. They showed some heart. They did this. It's just criticism for, how did you not beat that team worse? And that's kind of where USC is right now. That's kind of what the expectation is for USC right now. Is people are expecting this USC team to come out and just blow people out every week. And that's not really how it works. I mean, maybe the elite teams can kind of come out and do that from time to time, but you just don't really see that too often. But they're finding ways to win, and they're finding ways to get it done, and that's they're winning games. But you can't also completely ignore the fact that their opponents are a combined 10-25. And when you look at Notre Dame, and I'm going to give you Notre Dame's Power Five schedule first, because they both played 6 Power Five teams. But if you look at Notre Dame's opponents on the season, Notre Dame's opponents on the season are 24-9 compared to USC's who are 10-25. And then, of course, Tennessee State, if you want to throw Tennessee State in there, Tennessee State's 3-2, which adds to it. So it'd be 27-11 compared to 10-25. So the quality of the teams they've played up to this point in time is very different. And so you have to ask yourself, like, okay, USC's got some great numbers, but what would it be like if they played a tougher schedule? I don't know the answer, but that's what makes this such an intriguing matchup. Let me give you guys some data here real quick. So we talk about USC's defense, and I brought this up the other day. I showed the graphic of how poor USC's defense is. But here's what makes it even more wild. When you think about the fact that USC right now on the season ranks, I'm going to pull up the numbers here, and I'll show them. I will dive into them a little bit. But right now, USC ranks 79th in the country in points allowed per game, and they're 112th in yards per game. Here's the scoring offense average and rankings for USC's opponents. San Jose State ranks 75th at 28 points per game. Nevada ranks 131st at 15.4 points per game. Stanford ranks 119th at 19.2 points per game. Arizona State ranks 124th at 18.7 points per game. Colorado ranks 41st at 33 points per game. And Arizona ranks 67th at 29.8 points per game. So if you look at USC's 6 opponents, they're giving up 27 points per game. Half of their opponents average less than what USC is allowing on the season, and 2 of their opponents are barely above. And that's not good. And when you're giving up those kind of points to those kind of teams, it's like, that's a little bit concerning. And you look at just the Power 5 teams they've played so far this season. They gave up 28 points to Arizona State. They gave up 28 points in regulation to Arizona. I think it's important to point out the total in regulation and not try to spin it like, oh, they gave up 41 points to Arizona. How do you give up 41 points to Arizona, who didn't have their starting quarterback? Well, I think they played 3 overtimes in that game. So it was 28-28 in regulation, which is not good by any stretch of the imagination, but it's proper context in my opinion. And then you look at the USC offense and you're like, yes, but that USC offense is phenomenal. And it is. It's a great offense. You don't score 51.8 points per game if you're not really, really good. I don't care who you're playing. But here's the rankings, the defensive scoring rankings and numbers for Notre Dame, for USC's defense. San Jose State ranks 116th at 33.7 points per game. Nevada ranks 131st at 38.4 points per game. Stanford ranks 123rd at 34.6 points per game. Arizona State ranks 88th at 28.3 points per game. Colorado ranks 122nd at 34.2 points per game. And Arizona ranks 52nd. That's the best defense they've had, that they've faced, ranks 52nd at 23 points per game. And if you factor it in with proper context and you take away the overtime points, Arizona would be ranking a little bit higher. That's actually been a decent defensive football team for chunks of this season. I do like what they're doing there at Arizona. What Judd Fish is doing there. They're not great, but they're a pretty quality defense. They've given up 3, 31, 10, 20, 31, and now 43 on the season. But that 31 that they gave up to Washington, if you really think about it, they gave up 31 points to Washington, which is a lot of points. But Washington on the season averages 46 a game. They gave up 28 points in regulation to USC. USC averages over 51 points a game. So those are actually they're actually holding those teams multiple touchdowns below their season averages. So that's actually a pretty decent defense. And that was USC only scored 28 points in regulation, right? So USC scored 43 in that game, but 28 points are in regulation. And so to me, those things, you look at those things and you say, man, you put them in proper context. And if you don't care about these stats and what they've done, then you don't have to keep listening or watching the show. But I think these are very interesting statistics, and they put into proper context, what Notre Dame is facing this weekend. And there's multiple ways to look at this. Number one is to kind of get excited and be like, hey, USC hasn't played anybody. They're not as good as people think. I actually think USC is really good. But at the same time, you are going to be their best test, or should be their best test so far. And you get a chance to evaluate yourself and gauge yourself and say, hey, look, if we are going to be the team that we know we can be, and if we're going to be the team that we know we're capable of being and what we need to be, looking at it from a Notre Dame standpoint, then this is an offense that you should be able to keep well under their scoring average. Now, I'm not saying you should hold them to 17, but well under 51. And this is a defense that you should be able to score on. And so when you look at Notre Dame in their last 3 games, they've scored 17, 21, and 20 points. You're now playing a USC team that in their 3 games against Power 5 teams have given up 28, 41, or last 3 games against Power 5 teams have given up 28, 41, and 28 points in regulation. The only team that they held below that was Stanford, who had 10 points. But that Stanford team is one of the worst offenses in all of college football. So that's something that certainly comes into play when you look at that statistic as well. So this is going to be a very interesting matchup because it should be a get-right game for the Notre Dame offense. And if they're not able to do that, then that's a big red flag. And with the defense, this is a chance for Al Golden to kind of go out there and make a statement saying, hey, look, this is one of the best offensive minds in college football. It's a premier quarterback. You're going to you've got more of a full deck this year than you did last year, where you didn't have Cam Hart, you didn't have Tariq Bracy. You're going to have a healthier defense, healthier than you've been the last couple of weeks. This is your chance to go show that you've got an opportunity to, hey, look, we're pretty darn good. We're a pretty darn good defensive football team, and go out there and give them a chance. But then the offense has to step up. So it's going to be a great opportunity for Notre Dame. Weather's going to be interesting for sure, but I'm excited to see what Notre Dame can do. And when you look at that context, it's one of those things where, yes, this is a very good top 10 football team, legitimate top 10 football team, but Notre Dame has to find their way. And if they find their way, this is a football game they can win. Will they? I have no clue. No clue. None of us do. If you think, oh, they're just going to suck again, well, that's fine. You can feel that way. And I get your frustration, but you have no idea. And if you're someone who thinks they're just going to come out and hit on all cylinders and blow USC out like they did in 2017, I hope you're right, but none of us know because it's going to come down so much to the emotional and mental aspects of it. If this is a team with the leadership I hope it has, they're going to come out and play well. If it's a team that does not have the leadership that we hope it has, this is going to be a rough day. And that's the biggest thing that we're going to learn about Notre Dame on Saturday night. So next, I want to break up in the offensive defensive matchups and dive into really how this game looks on paper, but then also what about each matchup on the field is going to impact what we see. And of course, we're going to start with the Notre Dame offense. And we're going to talk about how the Notre Dame offense stacks up against the USC defense. It's going to be a very, very interesting evening because when you look at the numbers, Notre Dame still ranks really high in yards per play. They're still a top 35 offense in total yards and points per game, which are all, good numbers. And, but I think we would all agree disappointing considering they started the season scoring 40 points per game in each of their first 4 games. So for 3 games to drag your point total down, they've gone from 46 in the first 3 games to now down to 34 means that your offense is really, they've struggled in recent weeks. There's no doubt about it. And as we've talked about, Notre Dame in the last 3 games has scored 14 points against Ohio State. They scored 21 points against Duke. And if you look at the 21 points, it wasn't a pretty 21 points. Your first touchdown got set up by a fake field goal. You needed a fake punt attempt. You needed that to get your group going. Your second points, which was a field goal, was set up by a shortened field where your defense gave you the ball. Your second touchdown of the game was a play where you had a drive where you had to convert a 4th and 16 to get down there and score. So it was hard work. You look at the Louisville game this past week. Yes, they scored 14 points. If we're being honest, a lot of that was ugly as well, right? I mean, you talk about Notre Dame had 7 points at halftime. Their first field goal of the second half was set up by getting a short field. The defense gave them a short field. They did not convert a first down and got a field goal. So it's been tough sledding for Notre Dame on offense in recent weeks. And so the numbers look good or look solid still, but they've been steadily going down. And they have not been as good of the last 3 weeks, obviously. And I'm a big context guy, right? So if you look at the score, the points per yards per game, it's 437.9. But in the last 3 games, Notre Dame has failed to get within 50 yards of that number. They went for 351 against Ohio State. They went for 381 against Duke. They went for 298 against Louisville. That's a really bad number. Notre Dame hasn't been that low since the Cal game last year. It's the last time Notre Dame went that low. Even against Stanford last year, as bad as Notre Dame was, they still had 301 yards against Stanford. Went for only 4.52 yards per play against Louisville last season. That was their lowest mark since, you'd have to go back. 4.52 is Wisconsin of 2021 is the last time Notre Dame had a yards per play average that low. Only 6.1 against Duke and 5.5 against Ohio State. So when I say only, I mean relative to, those are okay numbers, but I mean relative to what they've done on the course of the season. So the overall numbers look great, but momentum matters in football. And right now the momentum is not where the Notre Dame offense needs it to be. USC, same deal. I talked about the context. This is a really weird thing. Like if you look at it, they rank 79th in the country, as I pointed out, in scoring defense, despite not playing. They play 3 offenses that average less than 20 points per game: Nevada, Stanford, and Arizona State. They only play 1 offense that averages over 30 points per game on the season, and that's Colorado. That's it. Arizona's at 29.8, but if you're going to look at the context of overtime relative to being positive for their defense, then you also have to look at the fact that they had 13 extra points in overtime as well. So that takes a little bit from their average also. And then when you look at the yards per game, they rank 112th in yards per game. Their opponent, San Jose State, ranks 84th in yards per game offensively. Nevada is 129th. Stanford ranks 102nd. Arizona State ranks 105th. Colorado ranks, helps to spell it right, Colorado ranks 50th in yards per game. They throw for a lot of yards, but they don't run the ball at all. And then Arizona is actually the best offense they face from a yards per play standpoint at 32nd. But Arizona, as we mentioned, did not have their starting quarterback in that game. So USC has been getting gashed by bad offenses, or mediocre to bad offenses this season so far. And so when you look at those numbers in context, this is a really bad defense. But here's the deal. If I'm a USC analyst right now and I'm looking at Notre Dame's offense the last 3 games, I'm saying to myself, this is a get-right game for you. This is your opportunity to have a get-right game against a Notre Dame offense that right now can't really score on anybody that's any good. Yeah, they scored a bunch of points on Tennessee State, who stinks, and they scored a bunch of points on Navy, who stinks, and they scored a bunch of points on Central Michigan, who stinks, and they scored a bunch of points on, a team, NC State, who, they scored a bunch of those points late in the game. And, there's a lot of things that if I'm covering USC right now, I'm looking at it the same way from the standpoint of they have the opportunity to go out there and get right as well against the Notre Dame offense. So they need to kind of come into this game, Notre Dame, and say, hey, look, you cannot look at USC and be like, they stink. They're no good. We're going to go out there and just roll them. You've been playing really poorly. There needs to be a level of, we've got to get back to playing Notre Dame football. We've got to get back to playing the way we played at the beginning of the season, and even to a degree against Ohio State. If Notre Dame comes out and plays in certain areas like they did against Ohio State, they're going to score a lot of points in this football game, because obviously Ohio State is a team that is a pretty good football team. But USC is going to look at Notre Dame and say, you guys scored 42 points against Navy. Yeah, that's great, but Navy gave up 44 points to South Florida. Right? I mean, so Notre Dame is going to be looked at by USC as some similar deal. They are going to be a get-right game. And so Notre Dame needs to make sure that it's not that in this game. And so when you look at these numbers, Notre Dame has a very clear advantage when you just look at the entirety of the offense. When you look at the context of the teams that they've played, you can't even look and say, well, yeah, USC's given up a lot. But like, if USC had these numbers and they had played Oregon and Washington and Colorado and teams like that, you could say, hey, look, man, they've played some really good offenses and they've just given up points. But, Notre Dame's not as good as those offenses. As bad as Notre Dame has been, it's still going to probably be the best offense that that USC has faced so far this season. Think about that. Again, highest point per game average on their schedule, Colorado at 41. Colorado scored 6 points against Oregon. What did Colorado do this past week against Arizona State? Then they scored, I think, 27? If I remember correctly. Let me look at it right now. They scored 27 against Arizona State. So Colorado's offense scored on a bunch of teams that aren't very good either, right? When you look at their defenses. So this is a game where something's got to give in this matchup. Something's got to give. You just hope that it's not, meaning you've got an offense that's struggling, you've got a defense that's struggling. Something's going to have to give. Somebody's going to have to play well in this matchup. Is it going to be the USC defense or is it going to be the Notre Dame offense? I don't know the answer to that, but we're going to find out. You look at the matchup of the Notre Dame pass game against the USC pass defense. Again, similar situation. This is not a team that is very good at stopping the pass, and they've kind of been that way all year. I actually thought they started off in the opener against San Jose State pretty good. I thought that they had to hit a couple big plays. But overall, they were good. 5.1 yards per attempt, held San Jose State to below 50%. They did give up some yards to Nevada, but you look at it and it was a blowout, and they got some yards late. Shut down Stanford's pass game. That didn't surprise me. Stanford's pass game stinks. But in the last three games, they've given up 263, 371, and 303. They've given up a lot of yards in the last three games. And so, to me, when I look at it, this is kind of what Notre Dame needs. They need to play a team like this. They need to play a team. And the reason I like to point out the last three games, because none of those games were blowouts. You could kind of talk about the Colorado game was for a while, and that would be very fair. But Arizona, it was not a blowout. Arizona State, it was not a blowout. Those games were competitive throughout, and they gave up over 300 yards per game. The total of the last three games against Arizona State, Colorado, and Arizona is they're giving up 312.3 yards per game. And that's a lot of yards. That's a lot of yards. And if you look at, let me see the yards per attempt. So it's 84, 119. So the yards per attempt in that stretch is 7.9, which is pretty good, right? It's a pretty solid number. They've also given up 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. They've allowed their last two opponents to complete 66.7 or better in the passing game. So there's some things that you like and some things you don't like. Notre Dame is going to be a team that is going to have to come out and get their pass game right, because when you look at the numbers right there, those all look good, but those are, to me, very misleading numbers for Notre Dame. They rank 18th in yards per attempt, 19th in yards per completion. They rank 4th in touchdown passes. They have ranked 15th in pass efficiency. They rank 20th in big plays in the pass game, and that all looks great. But to me, that's because Notre Dame really beat up on bad opponents. They threw for 336 against Tennessee State. 286 on big plays against NC State, which was actually a pretty good game. NC State's got a pretty good pass defense, in my opinion. And they threw for 342 against Central Michigan. So I talked about the last 3 games, how, USC has really struggled throwing the foot or stopping the passing game. And I tried to give proper context to it is, yeah, their numbers are bad, but they've been even worse lately. Well, Notre Dame's pass offense has been poor lately. So they averaged 266.9 on the season, but the last 3 games, they're only averaging 217 yards per game. That's it. And so when you look at their yards per attempt in the last 3 games, it's 6.9. That's it. So again, something's got to give. What's it going to be? Is it going to be Notre Dame gets back on track in the pass game, or USC's pass defense steps up and finally gives them chances to make plays? But just looking at the numbers, when you look at the struggles that Notre Dame has had in recent weeks stopping the pass game, the reality is part of that has been the competition. It's been who they've played. When you look at Notre Dame's last few opponents, Notre Dame played Ohio. Their struggle started against Ohio State. Right now, Ohio State is the number 6 team in the country in fewest yards allowed passing. They're 7th in pass efficiency defense. Duke is currently 7th in yards per play allowed nationally. They are 3rd in quarterback passer efficiency. Louisville is a team that has not been as good stopping the pass. They still rank 41st in passer rating, which is not good, but it's also not terrible. And Louisville does rank 65th in passing yards, but Notre Dame went over the average that Louisville has given up in that game with 254. So they've played good pass defenses in recent games, and they've had success. And the hope, if you're a Notre Dame fan, is that Notre Dame can continue to find that level of success in this game and kind of get on track against a team that has struggled to stop the pass all season. The one matchup in this part of it that really concerns me the most is the bottom, second to last number on there. If you guys see down here, it's this number down here. It's big plays, right? And then the other one is, that got clicked over. Give me a second. Let's go down to passing game. It's down here at the bottom, and it's up here, these 2 right here, right? These are the 2 that concern me the most, and here's why. Because Notre Dame is ranks 45th in the country in sacks allowed per game. They have been especially problematic the last few weeks, and even when they're not giving up sacks, they're allowing Sam Hartman to get pressured. And when you look at the sacks for USC, as bad as their pass defense has been, they get after the quarterback, and they are able to generate sacks in these games. Now, when you look at their sack numbers on the season, they have had a couple games that pump the numbers up a little bit, but even the last 2 weeks against Arizona, Colorado, they got 3 each, which is good. But they had 8 against Arizona State. They had 5 against Nevada. They only had 1 against San Jose State, 2 against Stanford, 3 against Colorado, and 3 against Arizona. So those aren't exactly great pass rush numbers, but they do a good job of putting pressure on the quarterback when they know you've got to throw the football. Notre Dame is going to have to do a better job protecting the quarterback this week, because last week they gave up a lot of pressure and a lot of sacks. I say sacks. I don't know that they gave up a lot of sacks. I believe they gave up 3. Let me look at the numbers here real quick. Just give me 1 second. They gave up 5 to Louisville. A couple came late in the game, but they were pressuring Sam Hartman for most of the game, and that was a Louisville team that only came into the game with 9 sacks on the season. So it's problematic. So the numbers look like they're advantage to USC, but it's even greater when you consider how the 2 teams are playing in their 3 most recent games, because that can be the great equalizer. If you have advantages scheme wise, which as bad as it's been for Notre Dame, that's still true. If you have advantages personnel wise, which I believe to be true, if this other team is whatever, they're struggling at different types of things, you could say, hey, you've got all those advantages, but how they get negated is you cannot protect the quarterback. That's going to be a big key in this game. And so they're going to have to be ready for that and be prepared for that. And then we're going to talk about the last part of this matchup. And to me, I think this is the most important matchup in the game. Now, I would contend that Notre Dame cannot win this game if they don't throw the football effectively. I believe that to be true. They are going to have to be able to get the ball out. They're going to have to get the ball down the field. They're going to have to make big plays. If you look at the past game, Notre Dame 13th in the country, or excuse me, 20th in the country in big plays in the passing game. USC ranks 114th in most big pass plays allowed. Notre Dame hasn't been hitting them lately. That's obviously going to be a part of it. But to me, this is the part of the game that's going to matter the most. And here's why I say that. The numbers are fine. You know, USC's rush defense is better than their rush offense or pass defense, excuse me. Notre Dame's rush offense has been substandard lately. If we're going to be completely honest with you, and I know they've played some teams that are good at stopping the run, but I don't really care. I don't really care who you are playing for Notre Dame to run the ball the way they did, or failed to run the ball the way they did this past week against Louisville is just, to me, inexcusable. And I know Louisville has a quality run defense and all that, but you're supposed to be Notre Dame. You're supposed to be a team to go out there and run on people. And it was a very disappointing performance. Notre Dame was held to 44 yards rushing, and they only had 159 on Duke. Duke doesn't have a great rush defense. That was Notre Dame's lowest rushing total since they went for 42 yards in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma 2 years ago. And it was their lowest regular season mark since 2021 against Wisconsin. When you are doing things, running the football, that are what that happened in 2021, that's a problem, because that was not a very good running team. And so Notre Dame is going to have to pick it up. And I know a lot of people are going to, I see the conversation about midterms and all that. Guys, there were no midterms week of Ohio State. There were no midterms during the week of Duke. And those things started then, before we got into the Louisville game. So these are things that we can look for excuses and blame it on this, and this. But the reality is this is a trend that's been starting here now for a few games. And it's one that's going to have to be fixed, because this is supposed to be the strength of your football team. Running the football is supposed to be what you're the best at. And if you can't run the football against this defense, which ranks 92nd in the country in yards allowed per game, which is, if you're USC, that's even more problematic, because when you consider how many games that they've kind of really blown teams out, they gave up over 209 yards to Stanford. They gave up 198 to San Jose State at 7.3 per carry. Did a good job against Arizona State and Nevada as far as stopping the run. But those teams are, honestly, just really not good at running the football. Nevada averages 105.8 yards per game rushing. That's it. Fresno State held them to about the same numbers USC did in that game. Arizona State's rush offense also not very good. They run for 83.7 yards per game. Against USC, they went for 90. So even their 90 yards per game was greater than what they're used to doing. And when you consider that they had 8 sacks in that game, USC did, it even adds to the overall numbers. And then against Colorado, and they gave up 193 rushing yards to Colorado. Colorado doesn't run the football very well at all. Colorado ran for 193 yards against USC. Their next highest rushing total on the season is 70 yards. They did that against Colorado State. They ran for 4.3 yards per carry. It's not great. Their next highest total is 2.8 yards per game. Colorado has only gone above 1.9 yards per carry twice this entire season. Twice. 2.8 against Colorado State, 4.3 against USC. So when you look at the context of USC's rushing defense, again, it has to be factored in that this is not a defense they're not stopping great rushing attacks. You look at Arizona, who ran for 203 yards this past weekend. Arizona has topped that mark twice. They topped it. They went 186 against an FCS team, Northern Arizona. And then they rushed for over 200 yards against UTEP, who's not very good. UTEP right now in the season is currently 1-5. UTEP on the season is currently giving up 191.7 yards per game on the ground. They're not a very good rush defense. They give up 244 to Arizona. A week later, they gave up 307 to UNLV. And then of course they ran for only 91 against Mississippi State. They ran for only 145 against Stanford. They only ran for 110 against Washington. They went for 203 against USC with their backup quarterback. So again, when you look at the context of it, it's even worse for USC's defense. But we're still sitting here in a situation where Notre Dame is reeling, and this is why I say it's about emotions. It's about getting where are you at mentally? Where are you at physically? Where's your heart? Where's your pride? And that right there is why this game matters. This matchup matters so much, because it's not so much about the yards that Notre Dame runs for. We talked about this yesterday. USC is going to load the box. They're going to have a very similar game plan to what they did last year against Notre Dame, because last year in the game surrounding the Notre Dame game, they gave up 204 yards to UCLA the week before. They gave up 223 yards to Utah the game after. They gave up 305 yards in the bowl game to Tulane, who averaged 9.0 yards per carry. They gave up 221 to Stanford last year, 164 to Fresno State, and then they held Notre Dame to 90 last year. So they're going to be geared towards stopping the run. But two things about this matchup. Number one is you've still got to find a way to run the football, number one. But number two, this matchup matters a lot to me, because you're going to run the ball effectively against USC if you are pissed off, in my opinion, and pissed off and focused. Because if you're pissed off and you're just pissed off, you're going to play physical, but you're going to play undisciplined football. It means penalties, giving up tackles for loss because you didn't block your guy, right? It comes down to, did you play physical, disciplined football? That's where it comes down to. If you're able to do that, and the offensive coaching is just solid in this game from a design standpoint, and they use their personnel effectively, which I think they will, then you're going to run the football on USC. And I'll be honest, for me, I am really hoping that they come into this game willing to, at least early on, be willing to utilize Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price a little more. Because to me, I want to use my speed to crease this defense and get outside of it. So if they're going to pound load the box, then there are going to be things you can do to attack the perimeter, to use your zones effectively, to hit cutback lanes, to use some of your pin and pull stuff to be able to get outside and get running lanes. So things that they didn't necessarily have at their disposal last year, run game wise, that they have now, that they can go out there and be effective. And so to me, this is going to be about good scheme, use your players effectively. But at the end of the day, if Notre Dame does well in this matchup, it's because the O-line showed up a little ticked off, and a little, they're maybe listening to our show about how bad they played. I'm saying that somewhat sarcastically. And maybe some parents are listening to our show and telling them, hey, everybody's saying you're not playing well. Okay, fine. That's all fine and dandy. But to me, what matters more is you are an offensive lineman at University of Notre Dame. You are the offensive line coach at the University of Notre Dame. There is a standard of excellence here that you're currently not meeting as a unit. Now you say, well, this guy's playing well, that guy's – it's one line, one heartbeat, one unit, right? As a unit, they're not playing well. As a unit, they're not playing with the discipline and the physicality needed. You're the coach. You've got to fix that stuff. But when you're the players, you got to dig down deep, be a little pissed off, and come out in this game and say, we've got something to prove. We've got something to prove in this game. We've got something where we can come out and we're going to show them a little something in this game. And I want to see that. I want to see that from this Notre Dame offensive line. And if they establish that mentality, to me, that bleeds into every other part of this matchup. That bleeds into the pass game. That bleeds into the energy level. You're going to score points. It's going to fire up the defense. All of those things are going to be true. And that's going to tell me that this Notre Dame team came to play. So if they are thriving in this matchup, and I'm not talking about yards, because they can get a couple big plays or put some stuff on late. And even if you lose, you can still run for some yards. I'm talking about coming out from jump at the beginning of this game and just saying, we're going to put it on you. We're gonna just come out and physically just punish you because it's not your fault, USC. You didn't do anything. It's nothing personal, but we're pissed about what we've done, and we're going to come out and take it out on you. And that's the mindset that Notre Dame had in 2017 against USC. That's the mindset that Notre Dame had against USC in 2019. They went for over 300 yards in both games. That's the mindset that is going to allow them to win this football game. And if they don't do it, it's going to be a long night. But if they're able to do it, then that's when you start feeling really good about where Notre Dame is. And so when you think about having Audric Estime, yes, he's your dude. But when you've got guys like Jeremiah Love, you've got guys like Jadarian Price, you cannot come out of a football game and say, hey, we are going to come out in this game and with Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love having 6 carries. Can't happen. They need more touches. In this particular game, they need more touches because they have the skill set that can give USC some serious problems. And I'm curious to see if they're going to use it effectively. Doesn't mean you don't use Audric. If Audric's healthy, you use him, right? And I assume he's going to play this weekend. He finished the game last week. You still use him. You still use that hammer. You still use your Braun Payne as the hammer. But the speed has to be what you're building around this week at the running back position. And if they do that, I think this matchup could be very good. If they're able to do this, I think it bleeds into the other things, as I said, and this offense could get back on track because this offense is going to get back on track at the very foundation of it because this group right here takes some pride in the standard that's in front of them. And if they do it, then I'm excited about what they're going to show. And I'm excited about how this team is going to look. So that's going to be a very, very interesting part of what this game is going to look like. All right, let's dive into a matchup of the Notre Dame. Let's dive into the matchup of the Notre Dame defense against the. Hold on, I gotta fix something real quick. Just give me. All right, we got some stuff going on in the chat that need to clean up and deal with. So uh, I just put someone in timeout by accident. That's my bad. So I just put a little message down there for you. Somebody else is supposed to get booted out of there. So my apologies. Let's dive into the matchup here, folks, of the Notre Dame defense against the USC offense. And this is an interesting matchup. I talk about the offense first because number one, the Notre Dame offense needs to get going. It's like week on week against good on good. Because here's the reality of this matchup. Notre Dame defense this year has been pretty good. And Notre Dame's defense this year, even against Louisville last week, is it was probably their worst game of the year, still did enough for them to win the football game. Simply put, the offense has not been helping them, has not come close to been helping them this year. When you look at the Notre Dame offense and defense and what it's been able to do on the season, in the context of who they've been able to do it against, we talked about what USC's been able to do against really bad scoring offenses. Well, Notre Dame hasn't exactly played a team like USC or anything close to it. Navy's not a very good scoring team. They rank 111th in the country at 21.6. But here's the difference between USC and Notre Dame. They're playing bad offenses and letting those teams score above their margins or right at their margins. Notre Dame plays a Navy offense that's not very good. They average 21.6 points per game, but Notre Dame held them to 3 points. Notre Dame plays an NC State team that right now is not a very good offense. They scored 29.2 points per game. Notre Dame held them below their season average by about 5 points, and then one of those touchdowns came in garbage time. Notre Dame played a Central Michigan team that's given up 23.3 points per game. You held them to 17, which was actually one of their worst performances of the season. Ohio State on the season scores 35 points per game. Notre Dame held them to 17. which is their lowest point total of the season. If you look at Ohio State's numbers in the other, was it 4 games they've played, they've averaged 39.5 points per game. So you held them below their average. The Duke offense averages 32.6 points per game, which is 45th in the country. Notre Dame held them to 14, so 18 points below their season average. Or excuse me, it was 14. Held them to 18 points below their season average. And then Louisville, as you look at the Louisville game, Notre Dame gave up 33 points. Louisville averages 36.3. I'll contend that, again, you held them below their season average. So every single opponent you've played this year has been held below their season average against you, some by greater margins than others. Louisville was only 3 points behind, but I think we can all agree that Louisville should have been at least a touchdown below that number. Because, I mean, but they give us some points late. That's really what it boils down to. And but still, you didn't play good enough last week. That was the anomaly, though, and that's the difference. That was the anomaly. That was the game where you didn't play to your potential. Now you're in a situation where you're playing a truly elite offense. No one that they've played so far is elite. Ohio State's good. This is not a vintage Ohio State offense. It's not like you held, was it be like the 2019 and 2018 Ohio State offenses to 17 points. Ohio State's offense last year was very good, not as good as previous years. Ohio State's offense this year is not as good as previous years. Their numbers, even that I read, are a little bit inflated from a 62-point outburst against Western Kentucky. That's the only other game they've scored. That's the only game they've scored, I believe, over 40 points. I don't even think Ohio State had 40 points on Youngstown State, if I remember correctly. Let me pull up Ohio State's sheet real quick and refresh my memory. Yes, they scored 35 in Youngstown State. So again, not a vintage Ohio State offense. Now, Notre Dame held them well below pretty much what everybody else has held them in most statistics. It's not well below, but like the lowest yards per game they've had this year was against Notre Dame. The lowest rushing or yards per play was against Notre Dame. Their second lowest passing yardage total of the game. It was their third lowest rushing yardage of the season. So, they've done some good things even against those offenses. You're not holding USC to 17 points though, right? You're not doing that. You're going to hope to hold them to 30, right? Or below. That's the goal, right? Is to just make enough stops. But Notre Dame's going to need help from their offense. They have some things that they've done that they're good at. USC's not a very good third down offense. Notre Dame hasn't been a very good third down defense. That's got to change against USC. You've got to get more stops, because here's the concerning part that I have. Notre Dame's red zone defense is elite so far, which has kind of kept the numbers down. And that's not a knock on the defense, because you look at the yards per play, that's an outstanding number. Notre Dame's yardage totals are a little down because teams have had shorter fields. Notre Dame has given up a lot of red zone opportunities this year. And if you look at red zone attempts, Notre Dame ranks right now. Let's find it here. It's very low. Where are we down here? Notre Dame has allowed 23 red zone attempts, which ranks 97th in college football. Now, part of that is they've played more games, but only 3 teams that have played 7 games or more have allowed more than Notre Dame. Now, the problem has been not so much that they're allowing teams to move the ball at will, because if that was true, the numbers for yards per game would be higher. But teams have had a lot of short fields on Notre Dame, and it's required the defense to make a lot of red zone stops. USC is hard to stop in the red zone. They are. They rank 32nd overall in red zone defense, but they're 3rd in touchdown offense. So when they get in the red zone, they've gotten to the red zone 30 times. 25 of those have ended in touchdowns. Now, Notre Dame's allowed 23 red zone trips. Only 8 of those have come in the have resulted in touchdowns. The problem, however, is that half of your red zone touchdowns allowed have come in the last 3 games. You allowed Duke to go 2 for 4. Louisville went 1 of 3. Ohio State went 1 of 2. You did a little better than you did against NC State, where NC State went 2 of 3. So you've been good, but you're starting to give up a few more a few more of those in recent games after holding your first two opponents to none, but it's still good. It's still a very good number. But again, none of these offenses are as good as USC. None of them are. And so Notre Dame's going to have to do a better job in a couple areas. Number one, more third down stops. You're going to have to get more third down stops in this game. And then number two, you're not very good at forcing turnovers. USC just doesn't turn it over very much. You've got to make some plays to force turnovers. Notre Dame had multiple chances to force turnovers against USC last year, and they just failed to close on those balls. That can't happen. If you get a chance to get the ball away from Caleb Williams, you got to do it. You have to do it in this game. That's going to be a big part of the matchup. Quickly look at the passing game numbers. Again, this is elite on elite. Notre Dame's pass defense is legitimately outstanding, and they've been prone to giving up some big plays at times. But even last week against Louisville came in with a pass offense that was averaging over 300 yards a game. If you look at Louisville's production in the pass game prior to that, as I said before, I believe they were at like 301. Excuse me. I'm looking at Notre Dame. So let's go to Louisville's pass offense. I believe they were around 301. Let me just look it up real quick. 1650 minus 150, 145 equals divided by 5. The Louisville was averaging 301 passing yards per game on the season. Their lowest total up to that point in time was 238 against Indiana. They averaged 10.3 yards per attempt in that game because they only attempted 23 passes. And Notre Dame held them to 145 yards passing. So that's almost 100 below the next next worst number of 238 for Indiana. And it's over 100 more than anyone else. They'd gone for 247 against Georgia Tech, 346 against Murray State, 238 against Miami, 388 against Boston College, 286 against NC State. Their yards per attempt numbers were 8.0, 10.2, 10.3, 18.5, and 8.2. Notre Dame held them to 6.0 yards per attempt. So once again, Notre Dame's pass defense has just been really outstanding all season. You gave up 240 to Ohio State, but only 6.3 per attempt. Ohio State threw 38 passes in that game. They gave up 260 yards to NC State, but only 5.4 per attempt. They needed 48 passes to get there. So Notre Dame's pass defense has been quite good this season. Here's the concerning parts about this matchup for me. Number one, Notre Dame has not been getting the ball lately. They've got 6 interceptions on the season. That's just under one per game. But in the last 4 games, they only have 1 interception. 3 of the 6 interceptions that Notre Dame has gotten this year came in 1 game against NC State. So they have not been getting the football. They need to get the football. That's got to change. But overall, Notre Dame's pass defense has been quite good this season. Now, the difference is Louisville had great pass weapons and a great pass scheme from Jeff Brom. They did not have a great quarterback. This is different. They have really good pass game weapons at USC. Just Louisville did as well. Their offensive line's okay, just like Louisville's, but the quarterback difference is way, way, way different. And so you're going to be tested like you have not been tested all year by Caleb Williams. You're going to have to play at your best. And so to me, we've got to see that. We've got to see that this week. They've got to be disruptive. Notre Dame still is tied for number 1 in the country now. They were number 1 by themselves last week. They're tied for number 1 this week. They've allowed opponents to complete 50% of their passes. Louisville was able to do 70.8. Part of that was they do a lot of balls behind the line of scrimmage. USC will do that. So the completion percentage is going to be higher than 50%, highly likely. But what you need to do is limit the completion percentage on the throws beyond 10. That's going to be the big key. And on the throws underneath that are going to have a higher percentage, you got to rally and tackle. It's going to be a big part of this game, really big part of this game, because you're playing, in my opinion, the second best pass attack in college football right now. And I know that they are not second in yards, right? Yards per game. Washington State is second in yards per game. And, props to what Washington State is doing with Cameron Ward this year. But right now, the best pass attack in college football is Washington's. I mean, they have the best pass attack in college football, in my opinion. USC, to me, is second. And it's not just about yards. It's just the overall effectiveness of it. It scares you more. mainly because of who their quarterback is. And like I said, Washington State's been or you've been very good this year. They threw for a bunch of yards on teams and aren't really good at stopping the pass, to be honest with you. They were 246 against Wisconsin, only 204 against UCLA this weekend. You're not going to hold Caleb Williams to that kind of production, in my opinion. And if you do, it's an elite performance. Stopping Cameron Ward, I mean, that's good. That's an accomplishment. He's a good football player. It's a whole different animal than stopping Caleb Williams. So they're going to have to be on top of their game for sure to slow that down. Here's the matchup that matters most to me. This one right here is going to be the one that impacts the game the most. And I talked about this last year, and I believe the same thing last year. And it's every bit as true this year as it was last year, if not more so. And that is in order for Notre Dame to have a chance to make enough stops in this game to beat USC, they have to stop USC from running the football. That's true from a Caleb Williams scrambling around standpoint, and it's true from stopping the run game standpoint. And I talked about this last year when we went into this game. I said, look, this may sound crazy, but you've got to come out and stop USC from running the football. And the reason why is because they're going to get yards in the pass game. They're going to make some plays in the pass game. What you have to do is you have to stop something. You have to make them one-dimensional, because if you make them one-dimensional, then you're going to have enough opportunities to come into this game and make enough stops to win the game, right? That's pretty much where it needs to be. And when you look at USC last year, they only passed for 232 yards in the game last year. Won 18 of 22. It's a very good number. Only passed for 1 touchdown last year. It was Caleb Williams. Actually, let me pull up his numbers. I believe it was his 3rd worst performance of the season from a total yards standpoint. Yeah, 2 for 232. He only had 2 games that were lower than that last season. The game before Notre Dame, he threw for 470 against UCLA. The game after Notre Dame, he threw for 363 against Utah. He threw for 232 against Notre Dame. Reason USC was so hard to stop offensively last year is because you allowed them to run the football. Your game plan was so geared towards stopping Caleb Williams that you did not respect the run game, and Lincoln Riley saw it early and went at him early, and they ran for 204 yards in that game, 5.2 yards per carry. Caleb Williams had his fair share of scrambles in that game, but you got beat in that game because you allowed not Travis Dye. They didn't even have Travis Dye. You allowed USC to go out there and run the football on you with their number 2 running back, Austin Jones, who had 154 yards on 6.2 yards per carry against Notre Dame last year, which is, I believe, his career best. To this day, is his career best, 154 yards. And you just can't allow that to happen. Now, USC's got a little bit of a different dynamic at running back this year than when they played Notre Dame last year. You still have Austin Jones, and you say, well, he's not running really well right now. Well, he didn't run very well most of last year either. He did have a nice game against UCLA the week before, but he didn't run a ton last year either. But they've got a little different dynamic because they have because if you remember, Travis Dye, as I mentioned, did not play in this game last year. And Travis Dye was their leading rusher last season. Austin Jones was their rotation guy. And Travis Dye last season rushed for 884 yards. He only played 10 games. And then, of course, there was the game he got injured in where he only rushed for 26 yards against Colorado. That was a kid last year that played 10 games, but he only was really healthy for 9 of them. And he rushed for over 100 yards 5 times last year, right? He was sort of their slasher back. And then Austin Jones was more of a smooth type of slasher back. Well, this year the dynamic is even more different because you've got a big physical kid in Marshawn Lloyd, and then you've got the slashers in Austin Jones and Quentin Joyner, and a kid that'll might not play against Notre Dame. He's played 3 games, and some of the blowouts he hasn't played a whole lot. Since then, it's really Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones. But they do have some other backs that they could go with if one of those guys goes down. And then, of course, you have Caleb Williams and his ability to run the football, mostly on scrambles, but occasionally they'll run them on a draw and do some different things with it. So you're going to have to come out in this game and shut this part of the game down. The problem, however, is Notre Dame's run defense is getting really worse week after week after week. Their pass game has been great all year, but sometimes, I ask myself, are you sacrificing the run to be, good at the pass? You have to ask yourself that. When you look at what Notre Dame's done the last 3 games at stopping the run, first five opponents held Navy to 126, Tennessee State to 89, NC State to 84, Ohio State or Central Michigan to 131, Ohio State to 126. Half of that came off one carry. Last 2 games, 189 to Duke, 185 to Louisville. And that's just not good enough. That's not good enough. Simply that. It's just not good enough. Notre Dame was not able to stop the Louisville run game last week. Jawar Jordan gashed him in the second half of the game. Yeah, you could talk about them wearing down and all those other kind of things, but it is what it is. USC is going to have zero sympathy for whether, how many games Notre Dame has played in a row. Just not going to happen. So they're going to have to come out and shut down this part of the game, make USC one-dimensional, stop the first and second down runs, get them in more third and longs, because he's going to convert third downs. He's going to convert some 3rd and 12s in this game. He's just that good. But if you put him in, the more of those situations that you put him in, the more opportunities there are to actually get some stops. And that's going to be key, especially early in the game, is get some stops. And that's what we need to see from this Notre Dame team. So this is the matchup, to me, that's going to have the biggest impact in the game. And then look, the pass game matchup is huge. I talked about that before, right? You look at the numbers. That's a dynamic pass attack, and there's no doubt they're going to have some success. You can't just let them come out and throw for 1,000,000 yards on you. Their receiving core, lacks sort of that elite player that they've had in the past. They don't. I don't think Zachariah Branch is listed as questionable. Lincoln Riley talked about yesterday that they're not sure if he's going to play this weekend. He's not practicing yet. Taj Washington's not an elite player. Brendan Rice is an elite player. Mario Williams is an elite player. Dorian Singer's not an elite player. Kyron Hudson's not an elite player. Lake McRae, their tight end's not an elite player. Zachariah Branch can eventually be if he can play and be healthy, but he's not an elite player right now. Deuce Robinson's an elite talent. He's not an elite player right now. Hasn't caught a pass since the Stanford game at this point in time. And so there's not elite talent there, or there's no elite receiver there right now. But I just listed a bunch of guys, and that's what makes their pass game dangerous. It's not so much that they have a player that can shut you down. It's not that they have, how are you going to stop Marquise Lee? That guy's just a dude. How are you going to stop him? How are you going to stop Drake London, man? He's just so good. How are you going to stop Michael Pittman? How are you going to stop Amon-Ra St. Brown? How are you going to stop, Tyler Vaughns and Deontay Barnett and Juju Smith-Schuster? And, we could Nelson Aguilar, and we could do this all day long. Robert Woods and how are you going to stop those guys? Well, they don't have that guy right now. What makes this pass offense so dangerous beyond just Caleb Williams, because just saying, well, they have Caleb Williams. That's true, but that's a little lazy. He can throw it, but they got to catch it. They got to get open. And if you watch this game, these kids are getting open. Colorado was getting USC in some tough second and longs and third and longs. And then all of a sudden, you got Brendan Rice coming over the middle, getting open. Well, look, as good as Caleb Williams is, he's not getting wide open because Caleb Williams. He's getting wide open because the scheme is really good, and that kid's a good route runner, and he's got great hands. And so when you look at these matchups and you say, man, you shut them down, boom, big play. That's the kind of stuff that Notre Dame has to be able to limit, because when you look at USC's top 2 pass catchers, they're both averaging over 20 yards a catch, right? They both have 21 catches. Taj Washington has 21. Brendan Rice has 21. Taj Washington has 456 yards. Brendan Rice has 434 yards. Mario Williams only has 12.1 yards per carry because he catches a lot of short stuff, but he's a guy with a lot of speed that can make plays down the field. So, this is a pass offense that's just got so many different weapons, and it's important. You're gonna have to hold your own on Saturday against this group, but it still comes down to, in my opinion, this right here. Because if you dominate the run game, you're dominating it because you dominated the line of scrimmage. If you dominate the line of scrimmage, number one, it's tone setting, which, just like I talked about the offense, it's tone setting. Who are you going to be as a football team? Where's your pride? Where's your heart? Not where is it, like they don't have any, but like what is it? What's your pride like? What's your heart like? What kind of football character do you have? Well, that's going to be on full display on Saturday. I'm not saying they don't have it. I'm saying that's going to be the key to coming into this game is, do you have it? And if you do, show it in this type of game. And if they do that and dominate the line of scrimmage, then that also is going to then play into the ability to get after the quarterback in the pass game, which is going to be key. And if you're able to do that, last year Notre Dame threw a game plan against USC. They completely abandoned trying to stop the run. Coach Freeman talked about how he didn't like that plan. So I don't think Notre Dame's going to go out there and just play their base nickel against USC. Might, just because most teams don't. But I think you're good enough in the pass game that you don't have to completely abandon what you do completely the way other teams do. I don't think you necessarily have to do that. You have to make some adjustments because it's a different type of offense, but I don't think you have to completely abandon it. And if we see that, then they may be in trouble. But if Notre Dame's able to kind of have some wrinkles but still play within themselves, that's going to be a big part of it. And I'm going to talk about some specific players when we get into the step-up time. But this right here is going to be the matchup that matters most for Notre Dame. All right, so I'm going to, as we get out of here, before we get out of here and move on to the next section, I'm going to ask you guys to do me a big favor. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you're listening via podcast platform, we would love a 5-star review. Greatly appreciate that. If you have not done so, hit the message boards, sign up in the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Would greatly appreciate that as we continue to try to build that community. I'm going to take about a 30-second little break here. I'm going to play the theme music. I will be right back here in about 30 seconds, so don't go. Be right back. I just got to take care of something here really fast. What's up, everybody? I told you I'd be right back. I was doing neither one of those things, Pete. I don't know why guys always think that. Sometimes people need to take a breath, especially when they're sick, and get some other of the visuals ready for other segments of the show and different things along those lines, get some things down. So sometimes it's just about things that I would normally do if I had a sidekick. I would normally do as they are beginning the next section. I would let them do that, and then I'd be taking care of these things. But this is a solo show, so it was neither one of those things, Mr. Weber. So there, how you like that? Part 2 of today's show is going to talk about who's got to step up this weekend for Notre Dame. We talked about the matchup. We talked about the numbers. We talked about, they've got to stop this part of the game. They got to stop that part of the game. They got to do these type of things and stop this number and this matchup. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to people, right? Football is a game played by people, and who are the people that are going to step up and say, hey, look, I got this. Ryan and I talked about it yesterday, right? When we're talking about things that Notre Dame needs to do as a football team, and say, hey, look, we're gonna, we've got to get better here, got to get better there. But one thing we talked about on offense was the playmakers got to step up, and one thing that we talked about on defense was who are the stoppers, who are the guys who are going to step up in big moments and make those stops, and that's going to be kind of the question. So as I go through this and I talk about the step up time for offense, it's going to be a couple individuals and then a unit, and these players to me are like somebody just said, comment from Richard Stevens in the chat, whole dang team and staff's got to step up. True. But okay, here's today's show. Everybody's got to step up. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day. There are guys above everybody else that to me are unique to this particular matchup, that are unique to the mentality that Notre Dame has to have to win this football game, that have to be able to say, hey, look, in this moment, I need you to really step up and lead us to victory. Those are the more complex parts of it that are unique to the matchup that I'm going to discuss. Otherwise, it'd be a 30-second show where I tell everybody who's got to step up and then, go grab some lunch or something, right? There are three aspects on offense that have got to be better from a player standpoint because we have beaten the coaching part up to death. They've got to be better. We've talked about that a million times. That's a given. If you don't know that the offensive staff's got to be better by now, I don't. Maybe you took maybe you're on sabbatical the last month, and you're just getting back. Fair enough. Staff's got to step up. But here's the three right here to me that are going to have the biggest aspects of it. Number one, offensive line, and I talked about this in the last segment. I want to say it again. The offensive line has got to step up for two important areas, for two important reasons. As I said in the previous segment, if the offensive line comes out in this game and sets the tone for Notre Dame, they can win this football game. If the offensive line does not come out and set the tone, it's going to be much, much harder to win this football game. And I don't know that Notre Dame can win this football game. And so there are some technical aspects that this is included. You've got to play sound football. You've got to play disciplined football. You've got to play as a unit. You've got to limit the run-throughs by the defensive line. When they're bringing pressures, you've got to get a body on a body and be physical because sometimes, guy comes through the line, you knock that sucker so hard that he goes flying into another guy and you kind of take out two guys with one block. But there are technical things that kind of have to be done. They've got to be more disciplined, be more sound. I've had people saying, well, these guys played better. It's like, yeah, that guy played better when he was engaged, but there was too many guys coming through where you don't know who's supposed to block who. Those are all things that are going to have to play better. They have to play technically better to win this football game. Rocco Spindler's got to move his feet off the line of scrimmage and get after. Blake Fisher has to be locked in, with what his assignments are. He's got to be consistent, with his effort. Pat Coogan, narrow your base, dude. Come flying off. Playing Billy Schrauth would make a lot of sense in a game like this. Joe Walt has not played like the best left tackle in college football the last 2 weeks. He's got to play like the best left tackle in college football this week. So there's sort of a, step up and be your guy. Be the best version of yourself as an individual, and then be the best version of yourself as a unit, and come out and play your game. They have not played their game in recent weeks. If the offensive line plays Saturday like they did against Ohio State a few weeks ago, then you're going to be pretty darn good because this is front seven's nothing like Ohio State's front seven. And so their overall talent up front is better than it was last year, but it's still not elite. It's not it's not what Ohio State's going to throw out there. It's not what some of these other top teams are throwing out there. That this unit's got to play well. So there's the practical aspect of it. They've got to play well. They've got to get the run game going. They've got to protect the quarterback. They've got to make sure that they're giving Hartman a clean pocket. If there are guys they can't block, and Hartman's going to have to be responsible for getting the backs over there, the back's got to step up, or Sam's got to throw hot, or whatever the case may be. But if those guys are coming free because they've got more than you can block, you've got to dominate your guy, which makes it easier for the running backs and the quarterbacks to make those guys miss. Because what you can't have, guy comes through, Sam knows it, so he steps around, runs out of the pocket, and then all of a sudden Blake's getting beat on the right side or Joe's getting beat on the left side, and their guy comes off and makes the play on him. Can't have that, right? So you've got to be able to come out and play to the best of your ability, and we've seen it, right? And somebody down here saying they haven't shown they can do that against good teams. Nonsense. Arguably the best game this offensive line had all year was against Ohio State, right? I mean, the arguably the best front seven you've played this season outside of Ohio State, when you include linebackers, NC State, right? You did what you needed to do in those games, right? The problem has been they didn't play well against Duke. They didn't play well against Louisville. They didn't play well against, I think, Tennessee State. They have played well in some other games. Ryan, you're not making any sense, bro. I hate to say it to you, but I shouldn't be distracted by what you're saying. But you can't, when you get proven wrong, you can't move the goalpost, man. We're talking about the O-line, right? We're talking about how the O-line needs to play. You said they haven't shown they can do that against the best teams. I just pointed out how they did that against the best team you played. And you say, well, they didn't win the game. It's not what we're talking about, right? There's other guys we're going to talk about here. But if the offensive line plays like they did against Ohio State, this team will win because USC doesn't have Denzel Burke at corner. They don't have Josh Proctor at safety. They don't have Davison at corner. They don't have the players Ohio State had, right? So they do need to play like they have in some of the biggest games this season. The best this offensive line played all year is in the biggest game they've played up to this point in time. So let's not be that fan base. Let's not be that hyperbolic fan base that does the whole, oh, they didn't step up in the big games. They didn't step up in this. We're trying to have a football conversation here. All right. And the fact of the matter is, this Notre Dame offensive line, when they have been on this season, including against Ohio State, has been dominant. Last year, same deal. When they don't play well, like they did against USC, they struggle to run the ball. When they step up in big games, like they did against Clemson, they run the ball and they dominate. So it's not about, oh, they don't do it against the best teams. That's weak. That's weak. That's not what we do here, right? Here's the fact. This is a game that they're more than capable of playing well in. Will they play well? I don't know. Neither do you. Is there a pattern of, well, they don't play well against the good teams, but they do against bad? In this instance, no, that's not true. That's why the offensive line is so important, because they haven't been you play great against bad teams, but bad against bad teams. So like when we get into the pass game in a second, that's absolutely been the story so far this season. But when you look at it from this standpoint, and when you look at it from the standpoint of this matchup and this unit, it is not about whether or not you can go out there and play against the best teams. Mike Farino just said this, and this is a true statement. This is a super chat from Mike Farino. Says Jack Sawyer, Ohio State defensive end, said that the Notre Dame offensive line was the best he has faced. He played against 21 and 22 Michigan, and he played against 22 Georgia, and he also played against 2022 Notre Dame as well. So when this unit plays its best, they are dominant. That, to me, Ryan, is what makes this whole thing so frustrating, is because you are capable of playing better. When you watch them against Ohio State and then you watch them against Duke, it's like we're watching two different units. And that's the maddening part. It's like, how can you be that good against them? How can you make the blocks you made against NC State and then play like that against Louisville? Right? Like, that's the frustrating part of it. The worst game you had all year was against Louisville. They're not even in the top three. Not even the top three of best defensive fronts you've played this year, right? And you just said it's disappointing. There's no consistency. That's the issue, right? Now we're speaking the same language, my man. Now we're speaking the same language, right? It's not about they don't play well against good teams. They only dominate bad teams. It's that lack of consistency, Ryan. And I'm with you on that. I'm totally with you on that. And that's what's so frustrating. But that is why no unit on this entire football team, in my opinion, is more important to what's going to happen on Saturday than the offensive line. We are right there on the same page on that one, Ryan. They've got to play consistently. They've got to play physical. They've got to be assignment correct. They can't go block, -4, block, -5, like we saw last week, to be honest with you. It's got to be consistent. They've got to be assignment correct. Here's the second part of it. As I said before, this is a game where you have to set the tone. You have to be trendsetters. You have to be the unit that comes out and says, we are mad. We are not at fans, not at coaches, not at, disrespect from USC, none of that. If you're an offensive lineman at Notre Dame, here's where your anger should lie. When you look in the mirror, that dude looking back at you, that was your problem on Saturday night. It wasn't Joe Rudolph's problem completely. I mean, obviously the offensive line coach has got to do a much better job of getting you prepared, but you've got to look in the mirror and say, Did I do everything that I can do to continue this tradition that exists at Notre Dame, which is why I came here in the first place? And the answer across the board, even for the guys that think they played well, is no, because it's about unit strength and unit pride. And if the Notre Dame football team is going to win this game on Saturday, it's because the offensive line on Tuesday's practice, in today's practice, in Thursday's practice is a physical, punishing, pissed off group. And then Friday walkthroughs, they're locked in. Saturday walkthroughs, they're locked in. But then they come out in this game on Saturday and they say, this isn't going to be a 7-on-7, throw the ball all over the field game. Okay. Yeah, we're going to throw into all that, but this is going to be grown man football today. This is big boy football. And do you want a piece of that or not? That's what the challenge needs to be. And if USC answers it, then they answer it. But you've got to force them to answer it. You got to force them to come out and say, we're going to come right at you. We're going to run it down your throat. We're going to come off the line. We're going to play as one, but we're going to play as a dominant one. And we're going to punch you in the mouth. And probably the greatest game I've ever seen an offensive line play at Notre Dame was not BC, where they ran for over 500 yards. It was 2017 USC. And it wasn't just the results. They ran for 377 yards that game, right? It was a dominant performance. But the Notre Dame run game had a lot of games like that in 2017. As I mentioned, when you look at Notre Dame in 2017, they ran for 422 against Temple, 515 against Boston College, 182 against Michigan State, who was the number 2 rush defense in the country that year, 333 against Miami of Ohio, 341 against North Carolina, 318 against an NC State team that all 4 starting defensive linemen were drafted in the 4th round or higher, 380 against Wake Forest. But something was different about that USC game. It wasn't just the numbers, 377 yards. They took USC's soul in that game. There were moments, and I've talked about this in the third quarter, where Rasheem Green basically kind of had his Roberto Duran no mas moment, where he was getting blocked by Quentin Nelson, who was just crushing him all game. He just started turning his back to him and just, whatever, you got this. And Notre Dame ran it away. Took their souls because they physically beat them up. I don't think this USC team is going to quit like that. This is a tougher team. This is a tougher mentality team, in my opinion. I believe it to be anyway. But you need to come out and punch them in the face, figuratively speaking, and do it all game long. And that's just kind of that's where we need to be. That's where we need to be. If they can do that to start this football game, then Notre Dame is going to have a chance to really come out and dominate this football game. Second group on offense that needs to step up in this game, to me, it's not even a group, it's a guy, and that's Sam Hartman. Now, when I look at Sam Hartman in this game, and I look at how he's played in recent weeks, he's not played well. He hasn't. He didn't play well last week against Louisville. He didn't play very well against Duke. He stepped up late in the game when it mattered most, but he hasn't played well lately, and it's not all his fault. I mean, he's getting pressured and all that, but look, Sam Hartman has got to do a better job. I'm breaking down the Louisville game, and the fact of the matter is there's just too many missed opportunities to me where there are open guys, but he's not getting the ball where he needs to go to. He's starting to lock in on receivers. He's starting to, rush some of his reads because I think the pressure is getting to him. And when I mean pressure, I don't mean the pressure of being at Notre Dame or the moment. It's more of the literal pressure from the defense. And there's a lack of trust right now that Sam Hartman has in his offensive line and his wide receivers. And that's got to change. You can't catch the ball for guys. You have to throw the ball. There were too many times last week where he's got to be willing to take some of those shots and not stare down certain guys. Now, part of that might be how he's being coached. And this is one of those things where Notre Dame has got to figure out a way to let Sam Hartman get back to being Sam Hartman. I mean, that's just the reality of it. He's got to, dude, you got nothing to lose now. Go out and play ball, have fun. They've got to turn him loose. This is just like everybody's, what's are super tight right now. And Notre Dame's not able to come out and have the success running the football. And they're not able to have the success running the football that they've had and throwing the football that they need to have. The pass game has to be better. The pass game has to step up. The pass game has to be more effective. Yes, they need to run the football, and all those things are true. But at some point in time, the pass game has to start protecting the run game a little bit. And this is a very vulnerable secondary, a very vulnerable defense. And Sam Hartman needs to be the guy that says, hey, guys, I got you this week. All right, just go do your job, and I got you this week. I'm going to get the ball where it needs to go to. I'm not going to be stressed about turning the ball over. No, you can't turn the ball over, but you can't be stressed about turning the ball over. You've got to come in this situation and say, I got you. If you go out and do what you need to do, I got you. If that means you need to pull Tobias Merriweather or Chris Tyree or Jordan Faison or Braylon James or Jaden Greathouse or Rico Flores, whoever, aside and put some extra work in, then put the extra work in. But you got to get on the same page. And if he's able to be that leader and that playmaker, then Notre Dame's going to score a lot of points in this game. So I'm not going to belabor it too much other than to just say Sam Hartman's got to be a guy this week. He's got to be the guy that you brought him in here to be this week. The other part is you've got to let him be that guy. That's a different conversation. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm a little more worried about that than I am about whether or not Sam Hartman's going to step up and step up to the moment. If he's allowed to be that guy, which means get out of his way, stop with the whole we're conservative and we're so afraid to make a mistake. If you were willing to throw the deep ball against some of the other opponents that weren't good, then you can't be afraid to throw the deep ball in the big games. That's just got to be who you are. That's what the kid was as good as anybody in college football last year at, is throwing the deep ball outside. Okay, and it's like this staff is completely unwilling to throw back shoulders. It's always like lead and let this kid go. Let this kid throw. There's going to be incompletions. There's going to be breakups. Let this kid throw the football. And when Sam gets that chance, he's got to put him on his shoulders and say, I got this. I got this. And that's what they need to do. And if he is, and he steps up, then this could be a great night. That's where a lot of my optimism comes from. And my third guy, and some of you are going to think I'm nuts, and some of you are going to, whatever. But I'm telling you right now, I don't know if it's a feeling I have about watching film or if it's just more wishful thinking about what needs to happen. But the fact of the matter is Notre Dame is Tobias Merriweather is going to have a breakout someday. He's going to have it, whether it's this year at Notre Dame or somewhere else down the road. I don't know when that's going to come. But it to me, if you're the Notre Dame coaching staff and you're looking at your team and you're looking at your football players and you're looking at the guys and how they match up, if you are not looking at your team and you're not coming away with saying, this kid number 5, we've got to get going. We've got to find a way to get him going. If you're not doing that, then you're not doing this coaching thing right. I'm sorry. I'm so tired of the players got to do this and the players got to do that. You missed a million opportunities early in the season to get him and Chris Tyree more involved in the offense, a million opportunities. And you chose not to do it. You chose to do something different. You chose to try to force feed other things. I don't know why. Doesn't make any sense, but that's what you chose to do. But the fact of the matter is your pass game will never be what it's capable of being this year if you don't find a way to get Tobias Merriweather going. Because if you don't, here's what happens. And no, he's not transferring. I'm saying if you don't a breakout's going to come. If Notre Dame throws him to the side and he decides to go somewhere else, then that's what will happen. I'm making a point, okay? But here's the deal, okay? If you want Rico Flores and Jaden Greathouse to be good football players right now in 2023, they are complementary players. Complementary players right now. Could eventually Jaden Greathouse become that dude? Absolutely. But right now, he's a complementary player. Jaden Thomas is a good football player. He's a complementary player. You've got 2 guys on your offense right now that have big playability. They have not been big play guys in some instances because of coaching and other instances because they didn't make the plays. Chris Tyree had a big drop this past week, although he's caught everything else that's come his way. Tobias has had a couple drops, although there's been plenty of opportunities where the ball hasn't come his way. He's got to step up this week. Tobias Merriweather's got to step up this week. So, the coach has got to design chances for him to get to football. They've got to push him this week. They got to build things into the game plan to get him the football down the field on the outside, down the field over the middle, intermediate stuff over the middle. They've got to find ways to get him to football. If he, to me, he's the whole key to, I'm just going to say it, the whole key to the rest of the season to me is that kid right there and how the Notre Dame coaching staff handles him. If they come into this game and say, hey, look, we've got to get him going. No more, we're just going to run the offense and whoever's there, it's just, plug and play and we're just going to run the offense. No. The great teams say, these are the talented players I have. I'm going to build them up. I'm going to get them ready to go. I'm going to coach them up, and we're going to put them in position to be successful. That's your job as a coach. And you've got to get number 5 going, because if he gets going and catches 4 balls for 85 yards, 5 balls for 120 yards, whatever the case may be, 3 balls for 100 yards, I don't care. But if he steps up and has some big plays, it makes your slot position more effective. It makes your boundary position more effective. It makes your tight ends more effective. It makes your run games more effective, because right now teams know they're not throwing that route right now. They're not throwing to that guy right now. Right? They know that Notre Dame is not going to game plan to get number 5 the ball. Last week is a perfect example. They're running a flood concept, and the safety is just staring right at Chris Tyree because he knows they're not going to throw the go route on there. Tobias Merriweather comes screaming off the line. The safety's in front of him, kind of slow pedaling. Tobias is going full gear. If Sam just launches that ball down the field, there's no way the safety can flip and run and get to that ball. It's a touchdown if Tobias catches it, which I'll get to. But he was locked in and he threw the corner. It got broken up, almost got picked off. The fact of the matter is you have to get the ball to him. You have to game plan to get him the football. And if he doesn't step up this week, then I understand you've got to make some decisions. That's the second part. If the coaches do that, if the coaches say, hey, 5, we need you. We need you to step up this week, then it's up to him to step up. I actually think he did last week. When you go back and watch the film, he was running hard. He was coming off the line with purpose. He was coming off the line with urgency. All the things I've been complaining about all year from him. He only got thrown 1 ball, didn't catch it, right? But he's going to have to come out and play well, because if the coaches do all the things we talked about and then he doesn't catch the ball, then it's kind of like, okay, well, that was a waste of time. He's got to step up too, because I truly believe if the X or it's actually the Z now, but if the Z position and Tobias Merriweather steps up in this game and provides a vertical threat, because that's what that position needs to do more than anything else, the Z position has to be a vertical threat, has to be a big play threat. If he's willing to do that, if they're willing to do that with that position, and if Tobias steps up, and if Sam Hartman's willing to throw the football to him, that's what can completely change the outlook of this game. If Notre Dame can start pushing the ball down the field, that's going to open up the run game. If they're able to make some big plays throwing the football number 5, then you know what? They can't do what they did last year. Like last year, Notre Dame opened up the pass game in the second half, but by that point in time, USC had a lead. And there was, the whole first half, they're just shut down the run. And then Notre Dame was playing catch up the rest of the game, right? So if you come out this game and you're able to hit some of those plays early and hit some of those big plays early, and all of a sudden Tobias makes a big play, and then now you run a double post, and that safety is a little bit worried about number 5, and all of a sudden you hit Tyree or Jaden Greathouse or Jordan Faison on a little quick post inside, and those guys catch and run. I mean, there's so many things you guys can do, and it does so much to just unlock this offense. That's what I start getting fired up about. Now, my confidence level in the coaches doing that is unknown at this point. I mean, it's low because I just haven't seen it. We need to see it. 7 games in, we really haven't seen it. They tried to do it a little bit against Duke. Tobias didn't make the plays, but you can't just try it once and then say, it didn't work. Screw it. Let's toss away a 6'4", 205-pound kid that can run. You can't do that. He's got to step up and make plays. They've got to design plays for him. It's a two-way street. It's always a two-way street. You've got to coach these kids up, give them the opportunities, and when they come, you've got to step up and make plays. And that's what Tobias has to show this weekend, because if he can step up and if he can make plays, and if Chris Tyree can be that kind of guy as well, this offense is going to be impossible to stop. And if they'd have done that against Navy and done that against Tennessee State and done that against Central Michigan and forced those things. They actually kind of did it early in Central Michigan, and look what happened. Offense just kind of starts going. Run game wasn't doing a whole lot early. They hit those big plays, and then boom, all of a sudden the run game starts to take off, right? If you'd have done that more, maybe we're in a different situation now. But we're not. We are where we are. But to win this football game, you need number 5 to be a factor. You need him you need to build him into the game plan, and then he has to step up. And if he can't step up in this game, then you realize we can't trust him in this season. You can't. You've got to figure something out. But you've got to try to get him going for this game. Has to. And I have a feeling, and it's not built on anything. I don't have any intel. This isn't me sharing something that somebody told me, about this. It's like, but I just have a feeling that if they do that, what I'm saying, that it's gonna be a big night for him, and then that's gonna make everything better. And even for Sam Hartman, if Sam Hartman can finally get that X position, Z position going, that's gonna take a lot of pressure off him as well. It's gonna make him a much more effective player. So it really gets me fired up about what it can be. Maybe that's just wishful thinking. Like maybe it is. Maybe it is. But we'll see. We'll see if he can be that guy. But they've got to build him into the game plan, and then he's got to step up and do it. That's my breakdown of the Notre Dame offense. Let's talk about the Notre Dame defense. And this one is this group's going to really be challenged. For the offense, it's a situation where you're not playing a very good unit. It's just, who do you want to be? Do you want to step up and play with fire? Do you want to step up and execute? Do you want to step up and do what you need to do against a bad unit or not? Where's your pride? Where's your heart? For the defense, it's more about you're playing a great unit. You've got to be locked in mentally. You've got to be locked in physically. Even if Notre Dame was 7-0 right now and rolling, it'd be the same thing. Like, this is going to be a battle. This is going to be a test. You guys are going to have your hands full against the best quarterback in college football. Quality running back room, really quality receiver room, a unit that can be very dangerous. So when you look at this matchup, who are the guys to me that are most important? When you play an offense like this, it's all 11 on deck. Everybody's got to play well. So that's the first thing. Everybody's got to play well. But within that, there's a few spots that they have to really play at the highest level they've played all season. And if they can do that, then Notre Dame's going to be able to make enough stops to win this football game if they're put in the right positions. And you can never control that, right? But here's where it starts for me. The starting defensive ends have got to play big-time football. I mean, with Javonte Jean-Baptiste, it's like, just do what you did against Duke, do what you did against Ohio State, do what you did against – I mean, just – he wasn't great last week, but it's like, hey, be that guy that you were, I mean, pretty much all year. And you just keep doing what you're doing, buddy. That's my message. If Nana plays like he did last week and Javonte Jean-Baptiste plays like he did all year, they'll be fine there. It's a much, much more productive position than it was a year ago, in my opinion. But they really need Jordan Patejo to step up. Like, they need him to arrive in 2023. I mean, he's done some really good things in the run game, but he's been almost a non-issue in the pass game. That can't be. He's got to come away with some of those stops. He's got to make some of the plays that they couldn't make last year. He's just too good not to be doing what he's doing. And, of course, the backups, Josh Burnham, Junior Tuihalamaka, those guys are going to have to step up and make plays too, because the starters can't play the whole game. The Viper position, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, all those guys are going to be so important in this game, because if Caleb Williams can sit in the pocket comfortably and not feel pressured, I don't care how good your corners are and your safeties can be. It doesn't matter. He's going to put up big numbers and they'll score a lot of points. It's going to come down to, can that group be dynamic? And that's going to be a big key in this game. As I've said in the past, the step-up discussion isn't always about guys that aren't playing well that need to step up. It's meant to be about, for whatever reason, whatever's happened, who's got to really step up and be their best in this game. And when you look at where they've been and who they are and how it matches up, your corners, for the most part, have been the strength of your defense for most of the season. Benjamin Morrison's had a couple iffy games in a row. He'll bounce back. You need that bounce back to happen this week. Cam Hart's been great all season. You need that to continue. Your outside corners have to be dudes. And one of the things that helped Notre Dame against Ohio State was they were able to somewhat neutralize the outside receivers in that matchup. They had very little success outside. USC runs a very different type of system than Ohio State. There's some similarities, but the way they use their outside guys is different. And these guys are going to get tested. They're going to have to play well. You had Benjamin Morrison played well in this game last year, but you didn't have Cam Hart in this game last year. He's going to have to be at his best. I mean, look, guys, you got a bye week next week and then Pitt. It's an all hands on deck type of situation. And whether that means Jaden Mickey plays or doesn't, or Christian Gray plays or doesn't, whoever's at corner, you've got a great cornerback room. It needs to play like a great cornerback room again in this game. Because because I've always said in games like this, you guys have heard me say this before. In games like this, your stars got to play like stars. And Notre Dame stars have to play like stars. And there's no bigger group of stars on their defense than, when I mean stars, like their best players. Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart is your best position group on the team. They've got to play like it's Saturday night. It's short and sweet. They've got to play like it's Saturday night. If they don't play like it on Saturday night, then Notre Dame's going to have a tough time being effective. I quickly transitioned to corners because I wanted to circle back to the first group after you brought the corners up. If the corners are playing at a high level, that puts a lot more pressure on the pass rush. Now, yes, Riley Mills and Gabriel Rubio need to play, Howard Cross, and hopefully Gabriel Rubio's back. They need to play well when they're on the field as well. You've got to make sure that inside pocket is there to where Caleb Williams can't escape vertically. And they've been pretty good about that this season. You've got to make sure you continue to do that. Make sure he can't escape vertically. So if that happens and he's going to have to escape outside, that's where the edge rushers can have some success. You want to keep him in the pocket, but you don't want him to stay in the pocket and be comfortable because he's an elite quarterback. If he's in the pocket comfortable, he's going to rip you up. But what I mean is you've got to get a push, but keep him in the pocket, meaning don't let him step into the pocket because you'll get beat. If he's going to leave, make him leave outside, and you have a little bit better chance there of having some success. But now, if the corners play like stars, then that means that the front guys don't necessarily have to be 7 sacks. It's just make him get rid of the ball quickly. That's the thing about this game for me when it comes to throwing the football is what you can't have is Caleb Williams. There's 2 things Caleb Williams can do that can hurt you. Number 1 is he drops back. He can go through his progressions, sit in the pocket comfortably, and get the ball out in 3+ seconds. Right? Comfortably stepping in the pocket because he's going to, he can fit the ball into spots that just nobody else in college football really can get him into right now. And so if he's comfortable and he can step into throws, then that's where he's going to have success. And teams just haven't been able to pressure him this season. And he's been able to do that effectively for the most part this season. And so if you're able to take away some of that quick stuff with your corners and maybe force USC to go to, reads 2 and 3, or some of their longer developing stuff, because you're taking this quick stuff away, that's where the DNs now come back into play. So they kind of play together a little bit. And so if you can then put pressure on him, maybe get a strip sack, which he doesn't turn the ball over hardly at all. Force him to throw off his back foot a few times. If you're able to pick it off, great. But I just want zeros, meaning I want incompletions. I want +2s. I want all those type of things. And your corners play at an elite level and your ends don't show up, it won't matter. He's going to throw for a bunch of yards. It won't matter. He'll pick apart your linebackers. He'll pick apart your safeties. And I don't care how good your corners are, they can't cover for 5-6 seconds. So if the corners then step up and play like stars, the ends now have to just play good football and have, with them, it's not even just about like dominant, 10 pressures like Jordan Patel had against South Carolina. It'd be nice. It'd be nice to see that, but it's more about, but you've got to be clutch. It's 3rd and 4. Caleb's out of the pocket. Keep your contain. Force him out of bounds 2 yards short of the sticks. It's 3rd and 7. It's whatever. You've got a chance to get after the quarterback. Get to him. Bring him down. Get your offense the ball back. You don't have to do it every series. You're not going to shut USC out. You're not going to hold them to 14 points. Probably not going to hold them to 17, 20 points. They're going to score. And so it's your job to say, we've got to make enough stops and create enough negatives that we can give our offense a chance to win the game. That's the key. The corners playing like stars is a big part of that. But the defensive line, the front 7 as a whole, but especially the ends, Baptiste and the Vipers are going to have to play a big role in that. That's the pass game aspect. The other part is the defensive line did a really bad job defending the run last year against USC. Really bad job. A big part of it was scheme, but they had their fair share of mistakes as well. They were actually pretty disruptive against USC last year in the pass game. They just couldn't finish. But Baptiste, Nana, Batelho, and those guys have got to be shut down players against the run. That's the other part. That's almost as important as pressuring the quarterback, just as their unique group. I mean, obviously the linebackers and D tackles are going to have a big role in the run game as well. But if the DNs can really set the edge effectively, then they're going to have a chance to be really, really key pieces to this working, and they're going to be a key group in this battle. Third guy, and I went back and forth on this. I thought Thomas Harper in the slot, that's a big one. DJ Brown's got to step up and tackle in space and not get beat. Ramon's got to be more disciplined in coverage. The linebacker's got to be good. I thought about putting Marist here. I thought about putting JD Bertrand here. I went back and forth over who these next guys are because it really comes down to everybody's got to play their at their best in this game. But there's one guy that I'm going to go with here as far as the third piece of this puzzle that can have a big impact on this game for the defense, and that's Xavier Watts. And here's why I say that. Because he's the one guy on the defense that he's the most rangy, or excuse me, safety position. He's the most rangy. He's a guy that can cover more ground. He's the most disruptive. We talked last year how the defensive backs, I think it was 8. Let me just get this. Let me make sure I'm correct on this. So last year, the safety group as an entirety had 2 interceptions and that's 2 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, 5 pass breakups, 8 pass breakups, or 8 total disruptions. So it's 8 passes defensed. So last year, the entire defense, the entire secondary position last year had 8 passes defensed for the entire season. This year, they've actually been better in that regard. The safety position has 4 interceptions on the season. The safety position has, 2. And I'm not counting the nickel. 2, 3, and 6. So they've got 10 passes defensed on the season already. In 7 games, they had 8 all of last year. That's great. It's not great. It's great relative to what they did last year. It's much better. When you look at the safety position, however, of those 10, Xavier Watts has 5 of them. So they play a lot of safeties. He's got 5 of them. He also has 3 he's got 3 pass breakups, 2 picks. He's got 1.5 tackles for loss. If you remember the game last year, Xavier was pretty disruptive in the game last year against USC. He had 9 tackles in the game, 5 solos, so he's very active in that regard. He had a pass breakup in the game against USC last year, and he had 2 other plays where he should have broken up a pass against USC last year, but he just missed time to jump. He's the kind of guy that can be a bit of a playmaker for the safety position. The other guys is just do your job, right? Just do your job. Just go out there and play your game. Don't make mistakes. Don't miss tackles. Don't blow coverages. Just do your job. With Xavier, he's the one guy, in my opinion, in the secondary that can be the kind of player that says, go make a play. It's 3rd and 5. They're running a crossing route. You drive on that sucker. He catches that ball, and you drill him and bring him down at the point of contact, and it's 4th and 2 instead of a first down. He's the kind of guy that when Caleb Williams throws that one fade route with just a little bit too much air, he can get over to it and pick it off. He almost did it last year. He's got to be at his best. I thought he did some really good things against Duke. He was okay against Louisville. He was pretty good against Ohio State outside of one bad play. That was several guys had bad plays on. He's got to be a guy that's at his best because he's the one safety that they have that can make that game-changing play. And if you look at my 3 on defense, it's defensive ends on level 1, it's linebacker, it's corners, which I count as level 2 players, the way that Notre Dame plays, and then it's Xavier Watts as the level 3 player. You need guys on all 3 levels to be effective for Notre Dame to have a chance to win this game. And if they're able to do that, then I think they can win this football game. I really do. I think they have the tools to win this football game. And those are guys to me that could be like, to me, all those guys, all those guys, they're game changers. If they play well, they're game changers. Sacks, interceptions, pass breakups, tipped balls, things that get USC out of rhythm. All those guys have the greatest chance to do that. And they're going to be key to Notre Dame making enough stops, because again, it's not about shutting USC down. It's make enough stops to let your offense have a chance to win the game. That's going to be the key for this Notre Dame defense if they're going to win against USC on Saturday night. Let's talk about part 3 of today's show. I'm going to do it a little briefly, and then I'm going to get into the mailbag so we can get out of here pretty soon. I've got some guys cutting my yard, so I got to go out there and deal with that here in a little bit. But I want to look at this Notre Dame offense, and I have some comments I want to make about the future of the Notre Dame offense. And it goes like this. Number one is, I love a lot about what Marcus Freeman's doing in Notre Dame. I've said this before. But there's one concern I've always had from day one, and it was not so much about Marcus Freeman, but just defensive coaches in general. The biggest question I always ask when you hire defensive coaches is he going to let the offense go, or is he going to be one of those guys that views the offense as being a complement to the defense? So everything I do defensively is what I wish they would have done when I was a defensive coordinator. Well, the reality is, a defensive coordinator doesn't necessarily always have the proper mindset of what's best for the entire team, right? And you can have a defense that's great and an offense that's explosive and scores a lot. And my concern the first couple of years with Coach Freeman, and I understood it last year because you didn't have the quarterback play last year, but my concern is that he is handcuffing the offense too much. Why bring in Sam Hartman and have him run the offense they're running against Ohio State and Duke and Louisville? It doesn't make sense. You've got to understand, and I've broken this down before, you have to understand that in today's football, yes, you have to be really good on defense. For Notre Dame to win a championship, they cannot win with Oklahoma's defense and some of these other teams that have won championships, LSU's defense, because Notre Dame's never going to have a 49-point per game offense, in my opinion, like LSU 2019. I just don't think it's going to happen. I don't know that they can have even Clemson 2018. I think they get close to it, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but I don't know that that's what you're necessarily building to. But you need a great defense. And so when I look at this situation and I look at the offense, and Coach Freeman's going to have to say, okay, I thought we could win this way, but we can't. We can't beat the best teams scoring 14 points because you're playing games against Ohio State. I said it yesterday. You've held Ohio State in the last 2 years to an average of 19 points per game. 19 points per game. You're 0-2. You're 0-2. You held USC a touchdown below their season average last year. You lost, right? The only really good team you've beat in the last 2 years is a Clemson team whose offense is very mediocre. It just is. It's not a very good offense. It wasn't last year. They weren't a good offense. And so Coach Freeman's got to understand that you've got to turn your offense loose. Now, that doesn't mean that you play this high up tempo, run 100 plays, try to get 50 type of offense. I'm not talking about that. I'm not saying you've got to throw the ball 70 times a game. Playing in the Midwest, when you get to October, November, you can't be a team that throws the ball 50, 60 times a game. Look at Ohio State against Michigan the last 2 years. 2 years ago, I kept hearing all these Ohio State fans talk about, the weather cost us against Michigan. You play football in Columbus, Ohio. You should never complain about the weather, ever. So you've got to be able to run the football, play physical football. All those things are true. But there's this misnomer that you can't be physical and explosive. That's false. You can't be a team that runs the football and scores a lot of points. You can't be a team that runs the football and plays with pace and tempo. And I think all that's false. I think that's absolutely false. I don't believe that. I don't think that that's something that really gets to the point um, where Notre Dame needs to be. Notre Dame needs to be a team that's aggressive on offense, that runs the football, that's physical, but also is a team willing to take shots. Now, to do that, you need skill talent. You need receivers that can do those things. You need receivers that can win one-on-one. Right now, Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of receivers, and that includes Tobias Merriweather, who I like a lot. They do not have a lot of guys that, to me, are going to go out right now and win a bunch of one-on-one battles. As good as Jaden Greathouse is, he's more of a guy that is, at this point in time, a system guy. He's a guy that now I think that can eventually change. I'm talking about right now, 2023. Chris Tyree is not that guy because he's not quite advanced enough as a route runner to be able to do those things. You need guys who can win one-on-one, but you also need a scheme that does more to get guys open. USC has really good players who can win one-on-one, but their scheme is great to get guys open. And to me, Notre Dame has too much of this like Clemson 2016-18 type of offense where it's just relying on your players to be really good. And that's fine to a degree, but you also, the best offenses scheme it as well. And I think of like the Stanford teams that were really dynamic early in the 2000s under Jim Harbaugh and when David Shaw was the offensive coordinator. And then when David Shaw took over as head coach, I mean, Stanford 2011 scored 43.2 points per game. 43.2 points per game. And Andrew Luck as your quarterback. Yeah, it was great. You know, you threw for 270 yards a game. You rushed for 210 yards a game. You're averaging 48 points per game. And to me, why can't Notre Dame be that kind of team? I think the Stanford 2020 team or 2010 team, which was Harbaugh's last year, might be even a better example because, you know, again, you had Andrew Luck. You know, he threw for 256 a game, 32 touchdowns, 8 picks. And you rushed that season for 213 yards a game with Stephen Taylor. He's a good player, but he's not an elite player. You go out there and you had Doug Baldwin, Ryan Whalen, Kobe Fleener, Chris Owusu. I mean, good players, but no elite players. Notre Dame can certainly recruit better skill than that. Can they have a quarterback like Andrew Luck? No, not many guys are like that, but they got some really good ones coming in. And then you look at that team that year, their defense gave up 17.4 points per game, right? I mean, and that's with giving up 52 to Oregon in a game where they played really poorly. The next year they come out against Oregon and they gave up a lot of points, but then 2012, they were able to shut Oregon down. They just didn't have the athletes because here's the thing. Stanford never had the perimeter athletes that Notre Dame is getting right now. They never had the kind of corner tandems that Notre Dame is getting and the kind of athleticism at linebacker that Notre Dame is bringing in its current sophomore and freshman classes and next season. You know, so to me, you've got to have an offense that's willing to be aggressive. You can run the football and be aggressive. You can throw the football and be aggressive. You can care about your defense not being overworked and still be aggressive. And to me, that's a mentality that Coach Freeman is going to have to adopt. Otherwise, Notre Dame under him is going to be talented enough to go 10-2 almost every year and then maybe occasionally make that playoff run. But, and I mean a real playoff run, not getting in a 12-team playoff and getting beat in the quarters. I mean like a real playoff run where you're a semifinalist, you're a championship team. They might be able to do that, but to me, they're not going to be able to win the games they need to win to be a title team playing the way that they're playing right now. And I don't mean execution-wise. Yes, execution's got to get better. Certainly, it's got to get better. But it's about philosophy. And when I mean philosophy, I'm not talking about Jared Parker's. I'm not talking about Tommy Reese's. I'm not talking about Andy Ludwig's. I'm talking about your philosophy as a football coach, as the head football coach, because you set the tone. You set the tone of what you think what your offensive coordinator's mindset is. Well, I can't call that because that play might end up not working out real well. So I'm not going to take that risk because coach told me he wants me to do this. You can be a team that cares about protecting the football and still be explosive. And again, yes, the talent's got to get better, but you're not maximizing the talent you do have in order to go out and maximize to be the team you're capable of being. You're underperforming with what you have. And the underperformance is coming from a lack of philosophy needed to maximize those players. That's the problem. And Mike Farino just said it. When you're a low-scoring team, your margin for error is significantly lower. Offensively, Notre Dame against Ohio State, they had 6 possessions, I believe, in that game. You got to be pretty perfect to be able to score enough points to win against a team like Ohio State. And I've said this a million times. All limiting possessions does means you lose by a lower margin, a lower score. If you'd played more up-tempo against Ohio State and you don't execute, you lose 41-38, 31-28. That's what the score is. When you minimize possessions and don't execute, you lose 17-14. The best chance you have, you've got to execute at a high level, but you also have to be a team that puts pressure on the opponents. And Notre Dame does not play and has not played for a long time. Pre-Marcus Freeman and currently under Marcus Freeman, they have not played the kind of football that puts pressure on defenses. Philosophically, they don't put pressure on defenses. That's got to change. And if Marcus Freeman were to fire Jared Parker at the end of the year, and I'm not advocating for that, because what I first want to see is maybe Jared Parker's not the guy. Maybe he's not. But what I want to see first is take the handcuffs off him, let him go do what he wants to do, let him go attack, let him do the things he believes in. And if he's not good enough, hire somebody else. But if the philosophy doesn't change and you fire Jared Parker, you're going to hire somebody else who's going to be on with the same handcuffs. And guess what? They're going to underachieve as well. That's got to change. The reason that's got to change more than even beyond just, hey, that's what it takes to win football games. It's this right here. If you look at Notre Dame's young players and the players they have coming in the 24 class, Notre Dame is going to start having some big time talent on offense real soon. It's already starting. You're already seeing it. Look at Jeremiah Love. We're not even seeing Jadarian Price even be to who he is at this point in time. He's going to get there. He's an explosive athlete. You've got Jaden Greathouse. You've got Rico Flores, who's a good complementary player. Tobias Merriweather is a talented kid. Jordan Faison. Braylon James is a talented kid. Cooper Flanagan's already on the field. Holden Stace and Eli Reardon are only sophomores. They're just sophomores, right? You've got Kenny Minchie, who's a talented player. You've got CJ Carr coming in next year, quarterback, who's a dynamic player. And I'm not even going to get into 25 yet. We'll talk about that down the road. I'm talking about immediate reinforcements. Quarterback-wise, you're going to be more physically gifted next year than you are this year. You won't be as experienced, so there's going to be some of those growing pains. But you're going to be more physically gifted next year. Receiver, you've got the young players. You've got Tobias. You've got I'm going sophomore down. You've got Tobias in the sophomore class, who's a dynamic athlete. You've got Jaden Greathouse, who's going to catch a bunch of balls at Notre Dame. You've got Rico Flores. You've got Braylon James. You've got Jordan Faison now. You're bringing in Cam Williams, who's going to be the most explosive receiver they have the minute he steps foot on campus. Micah Gilbert is having a dynamic year as a senior. Logan Saldate, dynamic year. Tight end, tight end, you've got Holden Stace, Eli Reardon. Hopefully he'll be healthy next year. Holden Stace is going to be a year older next year. Holden Stace is ahead of where Mitchell Evans was last year. Because remember, Mitchell missed almost the whole offseason, missed the first half of the year, only caught 4 balls. 3 of them came in the bowl game. I mean, if you think about it, Holden Stace right now has more touchdown catches as a sophomore. As a sophomore, he has more touchdown catches, or actually as many touchdown catches right now as Mitchell Evans had receptions last season at Notre Dame. Think about that. More, actually. Mitchell Evans had 3 catches last year. I thought it was 4. I thought he caught one in the regular season. He didn't. Holden Stace has more touchdown catches right now through 7 games of his sophomore year than Mitchell Evans had last year's entire sophomore year. You look at his 5 catches his whole first 2 years. Holden's got 4 receiving touchdowns already. Mitchell's going to be back next year, but now those guys are going to be a year older. You bring in Jack Larson, who's probably going to be more of a down-the-road guy. They're trying to recruit some other players on offense. Jeremiah Love is the most explosive Notre Dame running back they've had in years, right? Jabron Payne's a good football player in the sophomore class. Jadarian Price is an explosive player in the sophomore class. Keidron Young might be the most natural running back that Notre Dame has signed at that position in a while. For his size, he's an explosive player. Aeneas Williams is a very dynamic all-around player. So the talent level at Notre Dame is not an excuse now, in my opinion. This is more coaching than it is players. And there's some of it's youth. I'll grant you that. But the talent excuse is gone. And why is it gone? Because of Marcus Freeman. Because his job as a recruiter, because of Chad Bowden, a guy that he brought with him, fought to be here with him, because of the offensive coaches he signed. Yes, they're not doing a good enough job coaching right now, but the talent that they're bringing in is special. It's special. This is going to be a dynamic football team down the road if Coach Freeman is willing to say, I've got to turn it loose. I've got to let it go. I've got to allow it to be explosive. Again, doesn't mean you're going to go, hey, let's go back to 2010 and study some of Chip Kelly's offense at Oregon. I'm not saying that, but you've got to be aggressive. You've got to be willing to score, because here's the dirty little secret that a lot of defensive coordinators don't really think about until they're in it, is if your offense is explosive, that makes your defense way, way more effective. Yes, you may have to be on there more, but again, with the way Marcus Freeman recruits, you can run guys out. You can rotate. You can play four corners. You talk about like next year, you're going to have Benjamin Morrison, Jaden Mickey, Chance Tucker, Ryan Barnes as your veterans. You're going to have Christian Gray is going to be going into year 2. Micah Bell, the fastest guy on your football team, is going to be in year 2. And you're bringing in Leonard Moore. You're going to be loaded at corner the next couple years. You're going to be loaded at linebacker. You've already got Nolan Ziegler and Jalen Snead, who are only going to be juniors next year, and they both redshirted last year. They're redshirt freshmen. You've got Drake Bowen. You've got Jaden Osbury. You've got Preston Zinter. You're bringing in Kingston Viliama-Asa. You're bringing in Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak. You're going to be loaded. You can rotate. You can save their legs that way. But here's the thing. If I have an offense and go score 28 points in the first half of a game or jump on a team early, I've got a defense that I can say, hey, go get them. Go attack. Because we know we have an offense that can protect you. If you give up one, you give up one. But this is what Brent Venables did at Clemson. And this is where I say that, I've said this for years, that's the model Notre Dame needs to follow. Not specific scheme and all that, but I'm saying philosophy, development. Clemson's all about development at the time. Recruit the best talent you can, development. Marcus Freeman can bring in enough big-time elite players like Dabo did, which Brian Kelly didn't do enough of that. Then also you combine that with the good development players, the Foskis and the guys like that. Then all of a sudden, talent's not an issue. But they had a defensive philosophy that was aggressive. Why? Because they knew if we give up one, we're okay, because our offense can go get it right back in the very next series, because they can be a big play unit as well. And so that's the best way to complement a great defense in this era, is to say, I'm not saying you're going to be LSU 2019. They're not. But if you're willing to say we value going, and somebody actually just said what I'm about to say, which I love, Major Payne, nice job. If you value being the best offensive team in the country as much as you value having the best defense in the country, that's how Notre Dame can be elite. Now, when I say best, I'm not talking about 50 points a game. I'm not talking about 600 yards a game. I'm talking about being the most efficient and explosive offense in the country. So, yes, you may have more yards and points because you run X number of plays more than I do. But nobody scores and puts the ball in the end zone at the rate of possessions that we do. And you can't do that in today's era playing methodical, grind out the clock, keep away football. You can't. You've got to be aggressive. And if they can do that, that's the key, because the talent that Notre Dame is going to have over the next couple seasons, 24 and 25, at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and offensive line, I will put with anybody in college football. I know I'm in the minority saying that, but when I look at the God-given ability at quarterback, running back, tight end, receiver, O-line, it stacks up with anybody. Can you develop it and can you turn it loose? That's going to be the key. And if they're willing to do that, then this football team is going to be really, really, really special. And that's what I'm looking forward to, because the talent's going to come, but now it's up to Coach Freeman to say, now we're going to let it loose. I don't want a team that turns the ball over a lot, but I'm also not afraid of it. If it's an aggressive mistake, then I can live with it. You notice how he said that about the defense? Josh Burnham's penalty, Riley Mills' penalty, they were aggressive mistakes. Well, that's what a turnover sometimes can be on offense. Yeah, I don't like that he turned it over, but it was an aggressive mistake, because I know next time we get in that situation, he's not going to make that same mistake, but it's going to be a 60-yard touchdown. That's where you need to be. And if Coach Freeman's willing to let that go, then this team's going to be really, really, really good on offense moving forward with the players they have now and the players they're bringing in. And I cannot wait to see it. Going to wrap up with the mailbag. We're not going to get through all the questions. I do have some super chats that I want to get into here, which I appreciate. Sham Rocker with a super chat. Thank you, Sham Rocker. Does it seem to you that the Notre Dame media are soft on Marcus Freeman? There was no pushback when he said the O-line played okay, and all they needed to do was continue to progress when they've actually regressed, and that was the problem with the play calling. I think some of you have a very fundamental misunderstanding of what our job is in that type of setting. Did you see the guy arguing with James Franklin yesterday? That's what you guys want. Now, better arguments, but like, my job is not to go to I don't go to press conference. I hire somebody to do that. But Tim Priester's job, Sean Steyer's job, Tim O'Malley's job is not to go to a press conference and argue with Marcus Freeman. It's not their job to go. And if anybody had, with all due respect, I don't mean this to be arrogant, but if anybody in the media had the resume to go argue with the head football coach of Notre Dame, it's me, because I've coached football. I've won national championship. I've coached All-Americans. I've coached conference champions. I've coached record-setting players in football at the college level, 1AA and Division III. But that's not the job of a press conference. The job of a press conference is to go out and say, hey, listen, coach, what's your explanation for this? He offers it, and you can push back from the standpoint of following up, but your job is not to push back from the standpoint of saying, hold on a second, your offensive line played like crap. What are you talking about? That's not their job in a press conference setting. It's not, in my opinion, meant to be a combative situation. It's meant to be a information gathering, and then you can go write your articles. And then what you can do is you can push back on it and saying, hey, this is what he said. This is what I think about it in your writing or in your articles, like we do. We'll do that, right? We'll push back on things he said. Sean Davis and I did that on Monday. To me, it comes down to going out and saying, we're going to ask the questions. He's going to say whatever he's going to say, and then we react to it in our content. That's the job. So it has nothing to do with being soft. I really get tired of this. And this would be a great opportunity for me to hammer the Notre Dame. Oh, there you go. But that's not what it is. I'm asking. I actually thought some of the questions on Saturday were Monday were very pertinent. Hey, you ask the question, he answers it. It's not your job to argue with him. It's not your job to go out there and say, hey, listen, no, the offensive line did. Because if you break down the film, the O-line actually did some pretty good things inside. I believe he said more so the guards played well. I thought the guards played better than I thought as well. I said that yesterday. The tackles played poorly. But are you going to argue with him until he says, yeah, you're right, Blake Fisher sucked and Joe Walt had the first game? Would that be what makes you guys happy? It's not going to do that. It's not going to, nor should he do that. Now, what I want him to do is get in Joe Rudolph's office and rip Joe Rudolph a new one because of how his group played, and then have that group go out there and play better. That's what I care about. I don't care about what he says as a press conference. And I get so tired of these people that sit back and aren't ever at press conferences and criticize the questions that are asked, right? Like I think my issue when I say people are too soft on Brian Kelly, it's not that they were asking him tougher questions, because I never went at Brian Kelly at a press conference either when I used to go to those. It's use your writing for that format, right? Use your content creation opportunities for that, not to create an argument at a press conference. I just that's not that's not what it's meant to be, in my opinion. It's not. And I don't know what other people are saying about the offensive line performance in their own content. That would be more of what it's like. But the fact of the matter is there is pushback in our content creation here. Sean Davis and I did that yesterday. On Monday, Ryan did that yesterday. Things he didn't like about what Coach Freeman said. That's when that should be done, not creating an argument at a press conference or trying to call him out or play gotcha or be like, because he's not going to change it. He's not going to, you're right, man. Now that you said that, the offensive line did really crappy. You don't need us to tell you that. If you think the offensive line played like crap, you don't need me to go challenge Marcus Freeman to finally badger him into admitting the offensive line played like crap. That's just not the nature of this relationship. And that's just kind of where it needs to be. Next super chat is from Josh Miller. Do you think losing the Fiesta game, throwing for 50 times, made Coach Freeman to overcorrect in big games? Thanks for everything. No, I don't think so. I think that was more about just the nature of that game. And yeah, I don't. I really don't. I get where you're coming from. I mean, I think it's a fair question, Josh. I think it's something at least worth thinking about. I think it has more to do with he wasn't trying to insert his entire philosophy for that game. He was legitimately trying to get them out with a W. And so they just kind of ran what they ran. What they've kind of been doing most of the year. His DNA was really implanted onto that's why I never talk about the Oklahoma State game when I talk about his record or successes and failures. If he would have won the game, we would have talked about it because as a program, it would have meant something for the program, but it wouldn't have necessarily been a Marcus Freeman win per se. His DNA got put on the team in that offseason, in that January coming out of it, in February, March, April, May, June, and July, the good and the bad, right? And so I just don't look back at that game and think it has as much to do. Well, I just think this is who he is. I think this is who he wants to be. Now, the question is, will he adjust and adapt or not? And a perfect example to me is Georgia. I mean, when you look at Georgia, Kirby Smart, his first couple years, I mean, I know they had the team that wouldn't play for the title, but honestly, the big part of the reason that they couldn't win was because they couldn't score. I mean, you only scored 23 points in overtime against Georgia. You scored 17 in your loss to Bama. You scored only 20 against Notre Dame. You come out the next year with Jim Chaney, and yeah, they're a good football team. They went 12-2, right? 11-3. I'm looking at now 11-3. And you couldn't score in the big games. You scored 16 in the loss to LSU. You scored 28 in the loss to Bama. You scored 21 in the loss to Texas. Yeah, you racked up a lot of points on teams that weren't any good, but you couldn't score in the big games. You're just trying to out-talent people. Things started to change for Georgia when he hired Todd Monken, in my opinion. 2019 was even worse. They scored 10 in the loss to South Carolina, 10 in the loss to LSU, 26 in a bowl win over Baylor. They only scored 21 in a road win over Auburn. Only scored 24 against Florida. Like, they just couldn't score. Scored only 23 in a game against Notre Dame. He looked at that and said, boy, there's a lot of games we could have lost. So he goes out in 2020 and he hires Todd Monken. In that first year, it got a little better. They scored 28 in a win over Florida, or lost to Florida, 24 and lost to Bama. Scored 44 against Tennessee. It got a little bit better, but you look at that 2021 team, that Georgia team started to learn how to really be an explosive offense later in the year, and then 2022 even more so. So in 2019, they scored 30.8 points. So let's look at it this way. They scored 35 points the year they went to the college football championship game, and they scored 37.9 the next year. A lot of that was against kind of padding stats against really bad teams, 66 against UMass, 49 against Middle Tennessee, 45 against Austin Peay, 41 against Vanderbilt, 45 against a bad Georgia Tech team, a lot of padded stats. And so coaches don't look at padded stats. 2019, only 30.8 points per game. Your first year under Monken, you go 32.3, but you could see things were starting to change. You're trying to figure out your quarterback position. The next year, 2021, they go 38.6. And they had some padded stat games then too, 56 against Charleston Southern. But overall, they started being more dynamic offensively. 56, 40, 62, 37, 34, 30, 34, 43, 41, 56, 45. They scored 24 in the loss to Bama, but then 34 against a really good Michigan defense, and then 33 in your rematch against Bama. More consistency scoring points, and still only gave up 10.2 points per game. 2022, they really took another big step, and they scored 41 points a game. And it was a relative consistent thing where they could just kind of go out and score. In the last 3 games of the year, the SEC title game, the playoff game, and then the title game, they scored 50, 42, and 65. Right? Now, are there games they didn't score a bunch of points? Yeah, sure. And the defense bailed them out in some of those games. Defense played great in the win over Tennessee. Defense played great in the win over Kentucky. You had to bail you out a little bit. Neither side played very well against Missouri. But they realized with Todd Monken, hey, you can win a championship scoring a lot of points, and you need to score. Kirby Smart figured that out. Now Coach Freeman has to figure it out. Kirby Smart went through 2 coordinators before he made the right hire. Hopefully Marcus Freeman can figure it out with the current hire he has. That's the ideal scenario is that Jared Parker's that guy. That's the perfect world. We can debate whether he is or isn't. I'm not trying to have that argument right now. The point I'm making is simply that hopefully he can be that guy. That's the hope. That's really kind of where you want to be. And if he's willing to make that change, then this team is going to make a similar jump to Georgia. Because for all the stuff about, Notre Dame can't win, and got somebody in the chat just constantly saying they're stuck in the past, stuck in the past, stuck in the past, stuck in the past. Well, okay, so was Georgia, I guess, right? But Georgia finally said, okay, we can't play the way we did back when we won Herschel Walker. We got to do something different. Okay. Well, Notre Dame hasn't won in 35 years. They can't win. You know how long it was between Georgia's championships? 40 years. 40 years. Georgia won in, 1980, right? So, and then their next title was, 1981? 2021? So Vince Dooley won a title, I think it was 1980, right? They beat Notre Dame. So his title was in 1980. Last time Georgia won a national championship. And so they went 40 years before winning. And what was the thing that was the catalyst for it? And changed their defense at all. Still playing great defense. What's the difference? Kirby Smart realized in today's era, I got to be able to score. He didn't sacrifice defense. They're giving up 13 points a game this year, scoring 40.7. Last year, they scored 41.1. They only gave up 14.3. They gave up 10.2 the year before with 38.6. So with Todd Monken as your offensive coordinator your last 2 years, you gave up 10.2 and 14.3 points per game, but you averaged about 40 a game. Didn't have to sacrifice defense. Matter of fact, it makes your defense a little bit better. It makes it a little bit more dynamic because the pressure's off of them. And if Coach Freeman figures that out, then I think he's going to be effective. And if for some reason that game did get to him, Josh, and let's say you are right, because I honestly I don't know, then he's got to realize there's a happy medium here. They threw the ball 60 times that day. No one's calling for that. Nobody's calling for that. You've got to be able to run the football in Notre Dame. I don't dispute at all his desire to be a line-driven program. That is perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. Because you know what Georgia had the last couple of years? Really good line play on both sides of the ball. There's nothing wrong with that. But skill matters a lot too. And you've got to let your skill loose. What's the point of recruiting the skill kids they're recruiting? What's the point of bringing in Jeremiah Love and Kedron Young and Cam Williams and Jaden Greathouse and Braylon James and Micah Gilbert and Deuce Knight and CJ Carr and all these guys if you're not going to turn them loose? Turn them loose. And that's going to be the key is if he's willing to do that. That's what's going to determine if Marcus Freeman's going to be a good coach at Notre Dame. Because again, we're complaining about a 5-2 top 25 team. He's not terrible. It's just the desires championships. And that's really what's going to come down to. Zach 32 to Super Chat. Thank you, Zach. If there is no improvement in the wide receiver for the rest of the year, how likely is it the Stuckey will still be around? I mean, Zach, you know me well enough to know I'm not going to talk about that. That's not my job. I'll tell you this. If there's no improvement the rest of the year, Coach Freeman and Coach Stuckey are going to have some very long conversations about what changes. I'm not going to advocate for people to be fired. I've never done that, never will do that unless someone's doing something unethical. And I've never heard a word about Chancey Stuckey doing anything remotely like that. He's a man of faith and all those type of things. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, fire Stuckey. What I'm going to tell you is the job he's doing right now, I don't like. He's got to get better. The answer is not always firing people. I know that's kind of what everybody wants to do. Mac Brown had an offense that wasn't good enough early in his career, and he had an offensive coordinator named Greg Davis. And the fact of the matter is that Texas back then was just not good enough to go out there and beat Oklahoma, because every time they play Oklahoma, their offense would get completely shut down. Greg Davis was their offensive coordinator in 2002 when they couldn't score against LSU and they were an underachieving team. He was their offensive coordinator in 2001 when they went 11-2 but got dominated by Oklahoma, lost 14-3. He was their offensive coordinator in 2003 when they got dominated by Oklahoma 65-13 and then lost to Washington State in the Holiday Bowl and only scored 28 points. And did he fire him? No. But you know what he said? This isn't good enough. They went out in 2004, lost to Oklahoma 12-0. But that began a period where they changed their offense. And in 2005, the offensive changes really took into account. And they went out there that year. They beat Oklahoma 45-12. They went on the road and beat Ohio State. That team scored a lot of points. Big 12 title game. They beat Colorado 70-3, and then they won a shootout against USC. You go back and look at that Texas team. They had like 8 NFL players in their defense, but they knew to beat USC, you got to score. And so Mac Brown didn't fire anybody. He didn't go out there and say, Greg, you're not getting the job done. I'm going to fire you. What he said was, Greg, this isn't good enough. I know you're a good football coach, but what we're doing isn't good enough. Philosophy is not what it needs to be. We've got to change. What kind of athletes can we get in here? What kind of quarterbacks can we get in here? They went out there and started getting run-throw quarterbacks. Got Vince Young, got Colt McCoy, guys that were run-throw quarterbacks. And all of a sudden, running a completely different offense, no more fullback, tailback, 21 personnel. It was, we're going to spread it out. We're going to be athletic. We're going to get on the move, change their offense, and won a title and almost won another during that stretch with those two quarterbacks. Didn't fire the coordinator, but said, we're going to change. And so firing a coach is not always the answer. But it's okay. If you don't like what a coach is doing, just firing him isn't the only, because if you go hire somebody else that does the same exact thing, sit down and say, hey, look, man, we need to do it differently. What can we do differently? Let's get better. Let's focus on getting better. I'm tired of all this fire. How about we sit down with good football minds and say, this isn't good enough, but what can we do to get better? And if you don't think the coach is capable of making that change, then I understand changes have to be made. But I'd much rather talk about that. I'm never going to talk about firing coaches. Because I've been a coach. I've had to come home and tell my wife, I hate to tell you, but I don't have a job anymore, so we're going to have to move. Well, what job are you going to have? I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. You know, I'm never going to advocate for that. I'm never going to advocate to fire this coach so I can hear about how he had to go home and tell his wife and kids he didn't have a job because fans on the message board are pissed about the points they scored that weekend. These are real people. I'll criticize the job you're doing, and I'll give you football reasons why you got to do better. But I'm just not going to do that. And so whether or not Coach Stuckey's going to be around, that's not my decision. That's Marcus Freeman's decision. And I'll talk about whatever decisions he makes. But what I care about is the receiver room's got to get better. They got to play better. They got to be coached better. Simple as that, no matter who's coaching them. And right now, Chancey Stuckey's the coach. And I want Chancey Stuckey to do a better job and do the best job he can, because he's recruiting his butt off. So why would you not want the guy that's recruiting really well to also just get better as a coach? He's been a coach for 3 years. He's not a finished product. The key is, do you have the coaching operation intact to then challenge him to be better? That's going to be the key. Raymond Harden says, I'll raise your timeout with a super chat. Just got my Adidas pullover today. Love it. Go Irish. Raymond, I hope you saw my comment. I was getting ready to put someone else in a timeout, and then it bumped the you put a chat in, and so when I clicked on it, I clicked on yours. That's why I hate managing the chat when I'm doing a show. So that's my fault, buddy. Did not mean to boot you out of the show. Another super chat from T Smith 0323, converting third downs and bully them doing it. I'm with you on that, man. Again, this is a mindset game, right? This is a mindset game for Notre Dame. It's How bad do you want it? How bad do you want to be better? How bad are you sick of how you're feeling right now? Right? Are you okay with how you're feeling right now? Because if you're okay with how you're feeling right now, then go out there and play with the same energy. Go out there and practice with the same energy level. Go out there and play with the same energy level you had the last 2 weeks and see how you feel then. Maybe some people like feeling this way. Okay, well, I don't want to win with those guys because I'm not going to win with those guys. This is a gut check game for the coaches, for the players, for everybody. So I'm with you, T. Smith. That's where it's got to be. Michael S. I left the country 3 weeks ago at 4 o'clock and came back with 4-0 and came back with 2 of 3 losses. What went wrong? What were we wrong about? QB O-line coaching. It's not what we're wrong about, man. They're not playing well. Certain positions aren't playing well, and they need to play better. It's as simple as that. A lot of things went wrong, including they played good teams and didn't execute in the moments they needed to execute. That's ultimately what went wrong. Michael S. with another super chat. Thank you, Michael. And I hope you had a good time. I know you're out of the country. I hope you had a great time, by the way. I think SC's performance is due to lack of focus late in games. Notre Dame will get SC's full attention and focus. Your opinion? Yeah, I don't think that's it. I mean, they were down to Arizona 17-0 in that game. That wasn't about lack of focus late. You could say that about Colorado, sure. But you can't say that about Arizona State. And you can't say that about Arizona. I mean, they were, like I said, they were down 17-0 to Arizona in that game. Arizona State, it was 14-10 in the second quarter. USC scores to make it 21-10. Arizona State comes down to make it 21-13. USC scores early in the third quarter. Arizona State goes right down the field, turns a 24-13 game into a 24-21 game. USC kicks a field goal, make it 27-21. USC scores a touchdown early in the fourth quarter to make it a 2-touchdown game. Arizona State comes right back down the field 2.5 minutes later, scores again to make it 35-28. Not until USC scored that last touchdown with 7 minutes left were they able to finally put some distance and keep distance. So no, I don't think that's it at all. I don't. USC scored first to make it 7-0. Arizona State scored in less than a minute and a half to make it 7-7. There was no point in time where USC jumped on them big and then faltered because they weren't focused. You could say that again about the Colorado game, but you can't say that about the 2 Arizona games. You can't. That's not how those games played out, in my opinion. And again, you know, I kind of talked about that a little bit, but San Jose State's another example. Matter of fact, USC played better late than they did early. So it wasn't a lack of focus late in games. It was 21-14 game at halftime. 21-14 game at halftime. USC was up on them. That's it. They put it away in the second half. USC only scored 1 touchdown in the first quarter. It was a tie game in the second quarter. 7-7. USC scored twice and, you know, had a long touchdown pass. Ridiculous. That was that crazy run around, just heave it type of play. And then they had another touchdown pass, and then San Jose State came down and scored 21-14 game. So, no, I don't think their numbers have to do with starting, like blowing teams out and then losing late. That's not how that's played out. Sean Michael with a super chat. Thank you, Sean. Brian watched the 2006 AFC title game last night and thought that Colts offense might be something Notre Dame could implement. Thoughts? Thanks as always. The 2006 Colts team, honestly, I'm pulling up their season now. I don't remember enough about that team. That's the team that is that the team that lost to the Saints or beat the Bears? Let me look it up real quick. That's the team that beat the Bears in the Super Bowl. Honestly, I couldn't tell you if that's what it would be. I really couldn't. It's hard for me to look at an offense that's got like 4 guys that should be Hall of Famers and tell you that Notre Dame needs to be like that offense. Was the philosophy great, or did they just have great players? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I didn't watch enough of that team for me to be able to have a really strong opinion on that. I'm not ducking it. Actually, they only had 3 guys I think are Hall of Famers. Edgerrin wasn't on that team. Joseph Adai was their running back. I'm looking at it now. But Marvin Harrison was a Hall of Famer. I think Reggie Wayne should be a Hall of Famer. Peyton was a Hall of Famer. So I just don't know enough about that team to be able to answer that question, honestly. I mean, look, Notre Dame needs to be balanced. They need to be able to run the football. They need to have big-time players at running back, or I mean, don't have to. It's great if you do. You need to be really good at tight end. You need to be great in the offensive line, but you also need to be able to be outstanding on the perimeter. I think the balance of the team that they had with like Edgerrin was like Edgerrin James, and you had those receivers where you were dynamic in every way. You want to have an offense to where if you want to stop our run game, fine, we got other things we can do. If you want to take out our receivers and put all your attention on the receivers, that's cool. We'll still come at you. We'll still hurt you in other ways, right? There's all you want to just be that kind of balanced team where you can really hurt people. That year the Colts, I'm looking at it. Dallas Clark was a little banged up that year. He didn't play the whole season, but their two tight ends combined for 67 catches for 740 yards. So if you try to take the receivers out, they'd go out and make plays. Your running backs caught a lot of yards that year. Your running backs had over 500 receiving yards that year. So it's just you got to be able to beat teams in a lot of different ways, running, passing, and different ways within that, and different players. And so from that standpoint, I do know enough about that Colts team to say, that's a team that can hurt you in a lot of different ways. But as far as the specifics, I couldn't really get into it. Mike Farino says, super chat. Thank you, Mike. Last couple of years, Georgia was a top 5 offense overall. And that's kind of my point, right? Like, why did Ohio State, because Mike's an Ohio State fan, but why did Ohio State with a really good offense last year and a really good offense in 2021 that scored 45.7 points per game, why did they lose 2 games? Because their defense got their butts kicked against Oregon and Michigan, right? Why did Ohio State, in my opinion, were they not able to win, titles or get to the playoff in 2018? Because their defense wasn't good enough, right? Great offense, bad defense. Same thing opposite way. Is the great teams, the teams that win consistently, are really good in both areas to varying degrees. And so what made the Ohio State team so good in 2014 that won a title is because about middle of the year, they started being a lot better on both sides of the ball and playing better on both sides of the ball. And that allowed them to go out there and be successful and finish much stronger. And that, to me, is what most teams are good at. I could be wrong, but I think this Ohio State team is better than last year's Ohio State team just as a team. And we'll find out overall if that's true or not. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. But the reason I say that is because, no, they're not as good as they were last year on offense. They're 9 points down from what they were last year, 9 points down. But here's the thing that people aren't talking about. Their difference between their points scored and points allowed right now is greater than it was last year. But everybody says, well, they were so much better on offense last year. Yeah, scored 44.2 points per game. They gave up 21. So the point differential was 23.2. Right now, they're scoring 35 points a game, giving up 10.2. The difference is 24.8. So the difference is the same. The offense is not as good. It's still good. The defense is much better. Now, they've got to get healthy and do some different things and be able to score against some of the better teams that they're going to play. They can't beat Michigan scoring 17 points, for example. I don't think, anyway. But I think this Ohio State team has got a chance to be really good because I think their offense will get better. But they're so much better on defense. But they're also not afraid to go out there and attack and be aggressive. And that's kind of basically where you get down to. That's where they need to get to. And that's what I'm hoping they can get to. For Notre Dame. Nathan Milton with Super Chat. How does run get established with loaded boxes? I mean, you find angles. You say, okay, where are they loaded from? Do we need to do some things where we can quickly get the ball outside? Are they crashing off the edge? Then you can do things to get it outside. You can run some pin and pull stuff. But you got to be able to throw the football to hurt them. But here's the thing. Their loaded boxes aren't going to be the same as NC State's loaded boxes. Like the 80-yard touchdown run that Notre Dame had against NC State, that was against a loaded box. They went overload, put a tackle over, and ran power. So they took the NC State numbers and they overloaded with them numbers. They put two tackles side by side. They had a tight end there, so they ran a kick-out block, brought another guard back around. They had numbers. They could get a body on a body against a loaded box, play side, and they're able to run it, okay? So, you run some of your runs, they're crashing backside, have some reverses, have some jets, have some things that you can do to hurt them in that situation, but then also to hold that backside. So even though they've got more numbers. You've got two guys eyeing Chris Tyree or Jordan Faison or whoever on that reverse because you just ran for 25 on the play before. Those are all ways to control different things. But throwing the football is obviously going to be important too. But you can still have success against this defense loading the box. If Ohio State's loading the box, you're going to have to find something else to do. This team isn't Ohio State. Michael Campbell asked, thank you for Super Chat, Michael. What's your dream offensive playbook for Notre Dame, NFL, or college, especially the passing game? I mean, this is college football. You need to be a college offense. But, I mean, there's more carryover pass game-wise between NFL and college than there's ever been. So I'm okay with that. I don't really have a preference for what Notre Dame needs to do. Hire somebody that's really good. So hire somebody that's balanced, that can put a dynamic offense on the field. I don't care if he's I just don't think the reason I say I don't think air raid would work at Notre Dame. I'm for it at other places. People ask me about Tennessee. Will Tennessee's offense work at Notre Dame? I don't think it will because of the climate. You get into October and November, it's going to be cold, it's going to be windy, it's going to be rainy. You can't run your offense. A team like Notre Dame, if they're more of a pro-style team that's balanced, and that's what's helped Michigan. Michigan doesn't have to rely on the pass game like Ohio State did in past years. So if you're in those games like 2021 where it's windy, it's cold, it's snowy, Michigan says, man, we'll keep playing our game. This is what we're built for. Or Ohio State's like, we couldn't run our game because of this. Last year, they get the cold, crazy wind against Northwestern, and Ohio State could do nothing against Northwestern because they couldn't just line up and pound the ball. Notre Dame played Clemson that same weekend, threw for 85 yards, but they crushed Clemson. They made some plays on defense and all that. But they ran for 286 yards against Clemson that day because they were built to say, we're going to come out there. Now, be that team, but then also that team that also has the ability to be more dynamic throwing the football. I could tell you this, what would be more perfect for me is not the perfect offense, but a team that's, you've got a quarterback that's going, averaging 28 passing plays a game. You're completing, 20 out of 28, 22 out of, 32 at the most, something like, 20 of 29. So you're around that 68 to 70% mark. You're averaging, let's say you're averaging 29 attempts a game. You're averaging like 9 yards an attempt. That's 261 yards, You put that out over the course of an entire season, that's 331 yards. That's an average day. But some games, you're going to be much more than that. You're going to have better numbers. You're going to be 13 because you just had a big game. But when you have when you have that efficiency and you're able to run the football, so you're throwing for 280 a game, you're running for 210 a game, and all of a sudden you're dynamic. Some games you got to throw for 350. Some games you got to run for 260. But you've got to have that ability to be dynamic doing both things and be efficient and explosive doing both things. I've said this a million times. You don't got to be a super fast tempo team to score a ton of points. You don't have to be an air raid team to score a ton of points. You don't have to throw the ball for 400 yards a game to score a ton of points. Can teams like, can USC do that? Yeah, they can win games scoring a ton of points. Can they win a championship? I don't know that they can because you're going to play a defense that's good enough to keep Caleb Williams in check. Can you go run the ball on those teams? What if you play a game where it's 25-mile-an-hour winds and raining? Can you go win the game that way? I don't know. Can Washington do that? I don't know. Georgia can. Right? Notre Dame can if they do what I think that they can do in future years. That's going to be the key, Michael. So I'm just not one of those people that says you've got to do it the way that I like it. You need to be a balanced team. I kind of like the idea of pro style. I'm fine with that. That's more my philosophy. But there's other things you can do, but you've got to be balanced. You've got to be efficient and explosive running and throwing the football. If you can do that and you've got talent, you're going to be pretty darn good. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. I want to thank you all guys, all of you guys and gals for being with me today. I really, really appreciate it. It's going to be a fun weekend. We got Sean and Sean tonight, I believe, for our Wednesday mailbag, and then we'll be back tomorrow, Ryan and I, for our Keys to Victory and prediction show, and then we'll have a recruiting show on Friday. So we got a lot going on. Hey, folks, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We're really trying to get that community up. We've had just real steady growth, but if you're a regular listener here and you haven't jumped on board there, you're missing out. Also, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review, all that good stuff. Even more important, have a great rest of your day and we'll talk to you again very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.